Mated to the Broken Alpha. A Werewolf Shifter Romance Audiobook. Written by Rain Hart. Chapter 1. Blood on the Bones. The bones never lied. That was the first lesson Eryndis Skathe had learned when she was 7, kneeling in the dark chamber beneath the moon's Ard Keep, her small hands trembling as she traced the jagged markings carved into a femur older than the stone it rested upon. Now, a decade later, her fingers no longer trembled. Not even as she hovered the tip of her wolf fang bone stylus over the next ancient groove, not even as the windless air pressed against her ears like a heartbeat trying to drown out her own. In the stillness of the bone scriptorium, sound was sacred. It was not silence, it was listening. Crackling torchlight bathed the narrow chamber in a red glow, bouncing off shelves of bones stacked history. An entire wall of femurs, jawbones, and skulls loomed behind her, each inked with generations of skinned truth. She knelt at the central altar, where her mother's bones had been placed last winter, burned, bleached, and carved by the elders with the official record of her death. Her stylus pressed down. Fell in the line of duty during the Silverthorn Treaty War. Died honorably. Marked with moonsteel. No treachery. She paused. That word, no treachery, tugged at something in her marrow. A tremor coiled up her spine. Eryndis exhaled and pressed her palm to the bone. She shouldn't have done that. The elders warned her not to let skin touch sacred material. Not when you were born with bone voice. But she was tired of transcribing other people's lies. The instant her skin met the femur, the bone sang. A low, guttural note, a wolf's dying howl blurred into human screams, echoed through her skull. Then came the heat. Unbearable heat. She reeled back, vision fracturing. Her knee scraped stone, the stylus fell and cracked in two. Her mother's voice hit her like a blade. They burned me alive, it whispered over and over, curling with smoke. Flames bloomed in her mind's eye, for catching fire, hands clawing at stone, an iron cage searing skin. Her own mother's scent, salt and pine, corrupted by charred blood and singed hair. Eryndis gasped and wrenched her hand away. The femur rolled off the altar. Footsteps. Not hers. She froze, still gasping for breath, but not from memory now. Real breath, real danger. Boots scraped against the bone tiles of the scriptorium floor. She turned toward the sound. Figures in shadow, hoods, furs, claws exposed. 3, maybe 4. Their eyes gleamed amber in the torchlight. One of them stepped forward. His voice was flat. By order of the Elder Council, you are to be removed. The bone voice has gone too far. Eryndis didn't speak. Her mind scrambled, still echoing with her mother's death. Removed. They never said killed. But in Skathe blood law, removed meant the same thing. The lead assassin unsheathed his claws, silver-tipped, ritual-forged. Enough to slice through a ribcage with ease. No trial? She asked hoarsely. Her throat ached from the bone resonance. You were never meant to be judged, another said. You were a delay. A dead girl walking. She stepped back. Her fingers found the broken stylus, useless. One attacker lunged. She ducked, barely. Pain shot through her ribs as a claw glanced her side. She rolled, bone fragments clattering under her, and sprinted toward the side aisle, but they herded her, surrounded her. Her breath came in ragged pulls. There was nowhere left to run. The torchlight flickered. And died. In the same instant, the rear wall of the scriptorium breathed. A wind too cold for this buried chamber spilled through the stone. And with it came him. The shadows twisted, then shattered. The figure who stepped from the open bone seam wasn't one of hers. He smelled of snow, ash, and something older, feral. Not a hunter. Not a guardian. Something in between. His black coat shimmered faintly, damp with fog. Scars traced his throat like broken veins. And his eyes, red-ringed, glowing faintly, locked onto hers. Then turned on the attackers. The air snapped. Blood answered his presence first. The clawed man nearest Eryndis barely raised his weapon before the stranger was on him. No sword. No growl. Only blood. A flick of fingers, sharp, wolf fast. The man crumpled, chest torn open by something unseen. The second tried to retreat. Mist bloomed from the stranger's wrist, curved like bone, then pierced the second man's neck in a gout of crimson. The rest scattered, but the stranger didn't follow. He stood amid the carnage, boots wet with blood, unbothered. The scriptorium reeked now, bone, fire, and ruin. He turned to Eryndis at last. They stared at each other. Her voice shook. "Who?" "You live," he said, interrupting. His voice was deeper than expected. Smooth, but edged like flint. "Pity." Her brow furrowed. "You just saved." "I didn't save you." She straightened. Blood ran down her side. He stepped closer, the mist still coiling at his feet like a second shadow. "You've lived too long, Eryndis Skathe." She flinched at the use of her name. "You know me?" "I know the bone voice who was supposed to be buried last winter." "Supposed to?" "They chose mercy." "A mistake." The fury hit her then. Sharp, clean, pure. "You think killing me is justice?" "I think killing you would have been easier." Her fists clenched. "Then why didn't you?" He tilted his head. "Because he has other plans." Something sharp twisted behind his words. "Who?" He didn't answer. He stepped past her, stopped by the altar. Kneeling, he pressed his hand to her mother's femur. And for a moment, just a moment, the room went silent. No humming. No breath. No heartbeat. Then the femur cracked in half. He stood, wiped his hand on his coat, and turned to go. "Wait," she said. He paused. "What's your name?" He didn't turn around. But the last thing he said before disappearing into the misty seam in the wall was enough to stop her breath. Sorenik Veythar. The wall closed behind him. In the moonsard courtyard above, Eryndis Skathe stood beneath the flickering glow of the fractured moon, watching a column of smoke rise from the bone scriptorium vents. He tapped one long finger against the silver ring on his thumb. "So," he murmured, smiling faintly, "she lived." Chapter 2: The Trial of the Shattered Moon. By the time the blood was cleaned from the floor of the bone scriptorium, the accusations had already reached the courtyard. By dusk, they were carved into bone tablets. By nightfall, they were law. Eryndis stood in the grand hall of Skathe Keep with shackles of carved silver on her wrists and her name on every tongue. The chamber's dome arched like the mouth of a beast, ribbed and ancient. It hadn't been used for trial proceedings in 2 generations. But tonight, the council had gathered, cloaks heavy with ancestral sigils, long shadows cast by braziers of smoking bone dust. She stood alone in the center, a raised obsidian circle beneath her boots. It was an old stage. A place for sacrifice, not justice. Eryndis Skathe's voice echoed from above. "Let the record show," he began smoothly, "that Eryndis Skathe, daughter of the former highbone priestess, has violated the central tenet of Skathe law, communion with exiled blood." The council murmured. Eryndis's mouth was dry. Her wrists throbbed against the restraints, but she kept her spine straight. They would not see her bow. Eryndis paced slowly, elegantly, like a wolf at court. His silver ceremonial robe glinted like frost over grave soil. Less than a day after the failed removal order, witnesses claimed she was seen colluding with a known traitor, a blood-marked exile, within the bone scriptorium. 4 of our guards died. More murmurs. She bears signs of unauthorized resonance. Her mother's bones were disturbed. He paused for effect. Even cracked. Eryndis didn't look away. She didn't blink. "By all known law," Eryndis said gently, "this is not a trial. It is a mercy." Her father, Sorenik Veythar, sat in silence on the high throne. His face, once stone-carved, unshakable, now showed cracks of something darker. Not grief. Not anger. Fear. And beneath it, the kind of sorrow a man only wore when he'd already buried someone he didn't want to grieve twice. Eryndis's lips parted. "Father." You will not speak, Darieth snapped. Morik didn't correct him. She felt her breath twist in her lungs. She had expected judgment, but not abandonment. Darieth's hand lifted. I petition the High Blood Council to invoke the trial of the Shattered Moon. Gasps. Even the eldest leaned forward. That rite hadn't been called since the Night of Bone Reversal, an era of mad wolves, dead betas, broken lineage. Morik's voice finally came. You understand what that means, he said slowly. If the moon reveals a bond, then let it, Darieth replied. And if it chooses the exile? Darieth's smile was a knife. Then let her suffer the bond until it burns her to ash. The crowd stilled. All eyes turned to the center where Eryndis stood, still shackled, still silent. Blood Moon protocol was swift. The altar was prepared by midnight. The severed altar sat at the edge of the cliff, where the jagged shale met the starlit wind. It was said to be carved from the bones of the first Alpha, split by the gods when he betrayed the howl that birthed his line. Now it awaited another betrayal. The ropes around Eryndis's wrists were cut as the elders brought her forward. She walked without guidance. The wind was frigid. The stars hung like judgment. Above, the moon fractured. Not shattered, not fully, but enough to spill a ribbon of white-red light across the altar stones. A single shaft of cracked moonlight struck the platform's center. Then another figure appeared, dragged by two guards. Cloaked in frost and silence. Sorenik Veythar. The crowd murmured, split between fear and awe. Even from a distance, his presence was undeniable. He was not collared, though he should have been. Not muzzled, though his bloodline was considered feral. His wrists bled where they'd tried to shackle him. His hair was matted with dried fog. And his gaze was fireless, dead, detached. Eryndis felt something inside her lurch. They placed him across from her. Darieth stepped forward to begin the invocation. The trial of the Shattered Moon calls upon ancestral resonance. If the moon deems these two souls bonded, the mark shall appear. If not, she will be unmarked, void, and subject to execution. The elders began the chant. Moonlight flickered, then pulsed. A second beam of fractured white shot down, this time striking the space between Eryndis and Sorenik. The air hissed. Eryndis flinched, chest seizing. Her bones sang. Not gently. Violently. Like metal on metal. Her spine lit with fire. Sorenik did not move, but his gaze locked onto hers. And in that moment, as their blood resonated, she felt it. A pull. Like claws at her ribs. Like memory from a past she never lived. The crowd gasped. The mark appeared. On her neck. Burned in. A spiral of broken lines, glowing red, curving down to her collarbone like a fractured seal. Sorenik stepped forward. She tried to back away, but the altar held her, bound her. He reached out. His fingers touched the mark. And it burned. She cried out. He leaned close, breath cold, lips brushing her ear as he whispered, "This is what you wanted, isn't it?" She trembled, unable to speak. He pressed his hand harder against the mark. And then he pulled back, leaving blood behind. He turned to the crowd, lifted his stained fingers. "She's yours now," he said flatly. "But only because I allow it." Gasps again. Some shocked. Some thrilled. Darieth stepped forward, eyes narrow. "You accept the mark?" he asked. Sorenik's gaze didn't waver. "I didn't come to accept it. I came to brand her. You did the rest." He walked off the altar without asking permission. The elders didn't stop him. Eryndis stood there, still burning, still branded. The mark on her neck throbbed like a heartbeat that wasn't hers. Behind her, the blood moon faded. After the trial, she was given no time to recover. No water. No counsel. Only cold air and a cloak that didn't fit. She stood alone in the shadows of the moon's Ard courtyard, trying not to touch the skin where his hand had been. It still ached. She felt watched. And she was. Darieth appeared at the edge of the path like a ghost. "Congratulations," he said softly. She didn't look at him. Now you get to be someone's property instead of someone's shame. She swallowed. You did this. He smiled. No. The moon did. You manipulated the trial. You manipulated everything. He stepped closer. Yes. Why? He leaned in, voice barely audible. Because whether or not he marks you, you'll die by my hand. That was always the plan. Her breath caught. He straightened, eyes bright with the kind of certainty that only monsters wore with pride. Sleep lightly, Eryndis. The blood remembers. Chapter 3. Shackled to the Outcast. There was no procession, no ritualized escort, no whisper of dignity as Eryndis Skathe was marched from the Moon's Ard courtyard to the exile quarters. Only the scrape of boots behind her and the tightening silence of onlookers watching her pass. Her wrists bore faint silver burns from the earlier restraint, and the fresh blood bond mark still throbbed on the side of her neck, raw beneath the cloak that no longer felt like hers. Each step took her further from the bone halls she once memorized like scripture, and deeper into the part of the keep where light came not from fire, but from moss and mist and memory. The exile quarters were not designed for habitation. They were never meant for ceremony. It was where they placed the unwanted, the not quite dead, not quite disowned. Wolves too dangerous to kill but too tainted to crown. Sorenik Veythar belonged to no bloodline. And now neither did she. The guards left her at the threshold. She didn't knock. The stone door was already cracked open. The wind that crept through smelled of ash and wet leather. She stepped inside and closed it behind her. The room was dim, lit only by a single hanging bone lantern swaying on a rusted chain. The walls were stone, carved with shallow claw marks and the remnants of what might have once been prayer etchings, but time, or Sorenik, had obliterated them. At the far end of the room was a single low platform draped in a pelt of some creature too large and horned to be native. Above it, on the wall, hung a jawbone, still blood-stained. Lovely, Eryndis muttered, trying not to shiver. The shadows moved. She turned. He was already there. Sorenik leaned against the stone archway that led deeper into the den. He wasn't armored. No cloak. Just bare forearms, a thin shirt soaked with fog, and that same watchful, dispassionate face. You took your time, he said. I didn't know there was a curfew, she replied, lifting her chin. You have no idea what this place does to the unclaimed. I'm marked. By law. His eyes flicked to her neck, then back to her face. But not in spirit. Eryndis stepped further into the room. What do you want from me? Sorenik's gaze stayed level. I want you to admit it. Admit what? That you need me. She laughed once, dry, sharp, without humor. I don't. You wouldn't have survived the altar if I hadn't stabilized the resonance. You'd have torn yourself apart. You branded me. I kept you from shattering. She walked past him toward the center of the room, refusing to flinch as her boots brushed old ash and scattered bone fragments. You act like this is control. But it's just circumstance. Sorenik followed. The bond isn't circumstantial. You can feel it, can't you? Under your ribs. In your marrow. Get out of my marrow. He stopped close enough that she could feel the heat of him. It's not me you're afraid of, Eryndis. It's yourself. Her hand snapped up, palm flat against his chest, shoving him back. Bone heat pulsed at her fingertips. She closed her eyes, reaching inward. The room hummed. Not with light or warmth, but with the vibration of deep bone. The walls began to vibrate. The bone lantern cracked. The air filled with a low, keening wail, like the remnants of every creature that had ever died in this space were beginning to remember. Sorenik narrowed his eyes. Stop. She pushed harder. You don't control it. I do. You're bleeding, he said flatly. She opened her eyes and saw the blood trailing from her nose. Her knees buckled. Before she could fall, his hand caught her. He didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The bone wail collapsed into silence. She shoved him again, harder, furious at the fact that she needed his strength to remain upright. I told you, he murmured, voice too close. You're not ready to wield it alone. She pulled away, breath ragged, spine shaking. Her cheeks burned with a heat she couldn't name. Shame, maybe. Rage. Confusion. And under it all, something softer. Wronger. You enjoy this, she spat. He didn't answer. He stepped closer again. She didn't move. His breath brushed her cheek. I enjoy watching people discover what they really are. And what am I? A girl who still thinks the rules will save her. He turned, heading toward the back room. She stood alone in the main chamber, the silence settling around her like dust. That night, she lay curled on the furs of a forgotten beast, unable to sleep. At some point, she must have drifted. But her rest was shallow, tangled in bone-deep hums and phantom heat. She awoke to a knock. Eryndis sat up, blinking hard. The door creaked open. A figure entered, soft blonde hair braided neatly, familiar pale green eyes set in a face too young for all this. Lyanna. Her sister looked different. Thinner. Distant. You shouldn't be here, Eryndis said, rising. Lyanna hesitated, gaze flitting over the chamber, the cracked lantern, the bones in the corners. This is where they put you, she whispered. Eryndis reached for her. What have they told you? Lyanna stepped back. They said, you accepted it. I was branded, Eryndis hissed. There was no choice. But the mark took. Her voice trembled. And you didn't fight it. I didn't invite it. Lyanna looked away. They said you wanted to stay here. That he was your choice. Who told you that? She didn't answer. Eryndis stepped forward. Lyanna, listen to me. Dariatha's manipulating everything. He's warping what we see. What we remember. I remember you saying you'd never let them choose for you. I haven't, Eryndis said. But they're not giving me choices anymore. Her sister's hands twisted in her sleeves. I just wanted to see you, she whispered. Before. Before what? But Lyanna turned and fled before she could answer. The night grew colder. Eryndis sat in the dark, the fire long dead, staring into nothing. She didn't hear Sorenik until he was standing behind her. I see the family reunion went well. Don't start, she muttered. He crouched beside her. You look like a wolf at the edge of a trap, he said. I am the trap. You're not. You don't know me. I know your blood. She turned, eyes flashing. He was too close again. Always too close. His gaze dipped to her mouth. She hated that she didn't pull away. You think this bond means you get to do this, she hissed. Hover. Control. Speak like I'm already yours. He didn't answer. Instead, his hand pressed to the wall behind her, right beside her head. His other settled lightly at her jaw, not forcing, not gripping, but claiming space. I don't think anything, he said. I know what it means when the bond burns this deep. Get off. Her words broke when his mouth ghosted past her ear, not touching, just warm breath laced with the scent of pine and fog and something darker. You want to break it? He whispered. Yes. Then kill me. She went still. His voice dropped lower. Otherwise, you'll learn to survive it. Or you'll drown. Then, just as quickly, he was gone. The door slammed behind him. And she, left alone in the dark, felt her blood still humming. Hours passed. Then, the sound. Low. Rumbling. Not footsteps, but claws. Not breathing, but growling from beneath breath. She rose too late. The door burst open. Sorenik stood there, bare-chested, breath-heavy, eyes glowing red. His skin rippled with the start of a shift, not full, not complete. The cursed edge of beast form. Get out, she warned. He didn't move. Instead, he stepped inside, the door sealing shut behind him. His voice came ragged. You've been humming all night. What? My blood hears yours. Even in sleep. Even in silence. She backed into the wall. He stalked forward. You think you're safe from me? He growled. You think the law protects you from this? She struck him with bone force, weak, but sharp. He caught her wrist. Shoved her against the stone. She gasped, rage sparking. He pressed her in place, his forehead touching hers. The air between them shook. "You want freedom," he rasped. "You want this bond broken?" She tried to speak. Couldn't. His lips curled into a snarl. "Then learn to command me, or I will devour you whole." Chapter 4. Poison in the Feast. The Skathe Keep hadn't held a feast in years. Not a true one, not the kind where the long bone-carved tables were filled with fresh game and spiced root bread, where the ancient horns sang and the hearths burned long into the night. Not the kind where wolves laid down their grudges just long enough to eat and drink and pretend unity was anything more than a ritual. Tonight, though, they feasted. For her. Or so they said. Eryndis stood just beyond the arch of the great hall, draped in the ceremonial slate gray of a newly marked bondmate, her posture stiff and statuesque. The silk wrapped high on her neck could not mask the faint red burn of the mark left there 2 nights prior. It throbbed beneath the fabric like a living wound. Inside, the banquet roared. She saw her father first, seated at the head of the long hall beneath the mounted ribs of the first howler. Sorenik Veythar was not smiling. He had not truly smiled since her mother's death. But tonight, he bore the look of someone trying to survive a public drowning with the illusion of grace. To his right sat Eryndis Skathe, and to his left, Sorenik, no longer hidden in shadow, no longer dressed in exile's furs. He wore the formal bone-stitched coat of a Skathe-bound male, the color of crow feathers. His arms rested easily on the table. His posture was loose, relaxed, dangerously at ease. As if this entire performance amused him, Eryndis walked into the hall. The music faltered. A few dozen heads turned. And then the clapping began, slow, forced, respectful in the way one might greet a well-trained predator. She hated them all for it. At her side, Lyanna kept pace, her steps light and hesitant. "You don't have to sit beside him," Lyanna whispered. Eryndis didn't answer. She already knew she had no choice. Their bond had been acknowledged by the trial. To deny him space now would be seen as dishonor. She had no room left to lose. Sorenik looked up as she approached. His eyes were unreadable, but the corner of his mouth quirked, just slightly, as if to say, "You made it through the door." "That's something." She sat beside him. The air shifted. Eryndis stood slowly, lifting a bone cup. "To Skathe," he announced, and the voices in the room quieted. "To legacy. To those who endure." A pause. Then he turned towards Sorenik. "And to the outcast who bleeds his way home." The toast rippled outward like a stone cast into still water. Glasses lifted. Horns clinked. No one smiled. Sorenik's jaw ticked. But he said nothing. Eryndis watched him from the corner of her eye. "You don't drink," she muttered. "Only when I want to forget." She lifted her own cup. The wine was dark, almost black, rich and bitter on her tongue. She took a full swallow and set it down, fighting the urge to wince. Sorenik's voice, low, too eager. "Not for you." He didn't smile. Across the table, Eryndis' gaze lingered on her. She turned away. The feast began in full. Platters passed. Roasted stag and salted marrowroot. The drone of flutes. A girl somewhere began to sing a low hymn to the cracked moon. The shadows thickened with heat and drink and bone oil smoke. Eryndis felt strange. Not full. Not drunk. Light. Then, a hum. Deep, vibrating under her skin. She froze. The bone voice. Again. But this wasn't her reaching for it. This wasn't her calling anything. It was inside her. Growing. The mark on her neck flared. Her hand shot to it. Sorenik's head turned. Eryndis. Her breath hitched. Her heart tripped. Something was wrong. The hum became a screech. Not in her ears, but in her bones, like claws raking through her marrow. Her spine arched, her fingers splayed. The mark burned so hot it seared through the silk. Then the visions came. Not flames this time. Eyes. Hundreds of them. Staring from walls. From tables. From the faces of those around her. And her mother, again. Found in silver. Screaming through a gag of carved bone. "No," she whispered. "No, not now." She collapsed. The room erupted. Chairs scraped. Shouts rose. Someone screamed, witch-born. Eryndis writhed on the floor, clawing at her own arms. The bones were speaking in a language she couldn't control. Her mind flooded with old words, too loud, too many. And then hands were on her. "Sorenik." She heard his voice, rough, guttural. "Get back." Someone tried to stop him. He growled, a sound not human, and they backed off. She felt him cradle her head, force her chin up. Her mouth parted. "Drink," he ordered. She didn't understand until she tasted blood. His. He bit into his palm, pressed it to her lips. His blood was hot, metallic, alive. It poured into her, ran over her tongue, burned down her throat. She screamed. The hum cracked. The vision shattered. Her body convulsed once, twice, and then went still. The silence in the hall was total. Eryndis opened her eyes. Sorenik knelt over her, breath shallow. Then he coughed. Hard. Dark blood splattered the stone. And then he collapsed beside her. Later, they said it was a fit. A blood rage, maybe. They burned the goblet she'd drunk from. They marked her robes. And they whispered that she was not just bonded to a cursed male, but cursed herself. She lay in a small room off the great hall, heartbeat steady now, vision clear. Across from her, Sorenik rested on a low cot. Pale. Quiet. Eryndis sat up. The mark on her neck had gone quiet. But not dead. It pulsed slower now, gentler. As if calmed. Only he had been able to stop it. Only he. A bitter taste rose in her mouth. She hated the shame curling beneath her skin. Hated the memory of her own body betraying her, screaming for his blood. For relief. But what she hated most was the question already forming in her mind. What if it happens again? He stirred. His voice was barely a whisper. Now you understand. She turned her face away. I didn't ask for this. I didn't either. Their bond throbbed once, then stilled. Eryndis closed her eyes. Outside, the celebration continued. Inside, she began to understand the weight of a bond that might never let her go. And somewhere behind it all, in the deepest corner of the hall, Darieth Calethorn stood watching the flames. He lifted a fresh cup of wine, let it catch the light, and whispered. This was only the beginning. Chapter 5, Shackles of the Mark. She woke choking on nothing. No air. No sound. Just fire. The breath wouldn't come. Not fully. Each inhale clawed at her throat like she'd swallowed smoke. Her skin was slick, soaked with sweat, and beneath the thin furs of her makeshift cot in the exile quarters, her spine arched like something had sunk its teeth into her bones and wouldn't let go. Eryndis gritted her teeth. Not again. Her hands scrambled at the collar of her tunic, tearing at the fabric where the bond mark pulsed just beneath. The skin wasn't just warm, it burned, as if the mark had sunk tendrils inward, fusing itself to every vein, every whisper of breath. It pulsed in rhythm with a heartbeat that no longer felt like hers. Pain lanced through her sternum. She tried to sit, failed. Her fingers convulsed. A whimper broke free, guttural, involuntary. It was happening again. But worse. The bond was deepening. Changing. Consuming. She didn't hear the door open. Only registered the shift in the room when the air turned colder, sharper, like the temperature itself had dropped in fear. He was there. Sorenik. He didn't ask. Didn't speak. He crouched beside her in 2 strides, dragging the furs off with one arm. His hand went to her chest, flat, fingers splayed over her ribcage and pressed down. Hard. Stop, she gasped, breath catching. No, he said coldly. Not until you breathe like you again. She writhed beneath him, her body instinctively rejecting the force, the presence of him so close, too close, but the moment his palm met the mark, something snapped inside her. Not pain. Not quite. Something else. A crack of clarity. The fire behind her ribs flared and then dimmed. Not gone, but tethered. Like his hand anchored her to herself. You, she choked, you think this is helping? I know it is, he said, not moving. His eyes were glassy in the low moonlight slipping through the cracks in the stone wall. His mouth drawn tight. This wasn't gentleness. It was containment. This is wrong, she tried to shove him off. He didn't budge. Then stop pulling from me. I'm not. You are. Your blood's reaching out. You need regulation. You just won't admit it. I won't be regulated like some beast. Sorenik leaned closer, hand still flat to her chest. Then stop acting like one. The slap came fast. Her palm cracked across his cheek before she even knew she'd moved. He didn't flinch. Didn't move. His gaze remained locked on hers. And then he moved. Not away, but forward. He caught her wrist midair, the one that had struck him, and turned it sharply. Not to hurt, but to hold. She gasped as his grip tightened, restraining, not cruel, but commanding. Is this what you want? He murmured. The fight? The fire? I want you gone. Liar. She seethed. You think this connection gives you power over me? No, his voice dipped. It gives me access. To her blood. To her breath. To the storm spiraling in her bones that only quieted when he touched her. And she hated him for it. Hated how it worked. His other hand moved from her chest to the side of her neck, fingers hovering just over the mark. I can calm it, he whispered. But it'll cost you. What do you mean? He didn't answer. Instead, he pressed. The bond ignited. Not in flames, but in pull. A magnetic lurch that yanked her spirit against his like two fractured stars collapsing inward. His blood called to hers screamed back, and the space between them, what little remained, dissolved. Heat pulled between them, not from fire, but from the sheer pressure of closeness. Every place he touched burned with awareness, his fingers against her throat, his thigh braced between hers, his breath fogging against her lips. Her hands braced against his chest, unsure whether to push or to cling. Sorenik, she breathed, voice trembling. You can end it, he said. Say the word. But she didn't. Because even in her hatred, even in her shame, her body was still humming, still alive with need and fear and craving. Bone-deep craving. And he knew it. His mouth lowered, not to kiss, but to speak against the skin just beneath her ear. It's not about wanting me, is it? He murmured. It's about needing someone who doesn't fall apart when you do. Her heart cracked. Because he was right. The mark between them pulsed once more, and then slowly, agonizingly, it began to cool. The fire ebbed. The burning eased. Breath returned. Her body sagged back into the furs. But he didn't move. He stayed over her, one hand still curled possessively around her wrist, the other still resting lightly at her throat. I hate you, she whispered. I know. Their eyes met. And something between them shifted. Not forgiveness. Not softness. But something old. Something bound. Something faded. Finally, he leaned back. And she saw it. The splintering. Fine hairline cracks that shimmered like glass over the veins in his neck, tracing down to his collarbone and beyond. You're burning too, she said, voice hoarse. He rose without answering. Turned from her. His bare back was slick with sweat, scars layered with something darker, new lines, forming like fractures in glass. You should rest, he said. Your mark, she pressed. It's not supposed to look like that. He didn't turn. It doesn't matter. It does. Silence. Then his voice quieter. Before I die, he said, I'll make sure you never leave this bond. Even if it kills me. The door closed behind him. And Eryndis, alone again, touched the mark on her neck as if it might answer for everything she was beginning to feel, but still couldn't name. Chapter 6. Betrayal in the Council. The council chamber was colder than Eryndis remembered. Not physically. The braziers still burned with bone oil fire, and the room remained thick with the scent of ash, iron, and dried lavender. But the cold she felt as she stepped into the center of the spiral-carved floor had nothing to do with air or stone. It was the cold of watching a place you once revered turn its face away. 12 elders sat in a crescent at the far end of the hall, robes heavy with the woven sigils of ancient bloodlines. Behind them, bone relics shimmered on the wall, pieces of alpha skulls, cracked teeth, rib fragments etched with ancestral howls. Once, they had made her feel small in a way that was comforting. Now they felt like judgment waiting to be passed. To their right stood Dareth Calethorn. His hands were folded in front of him. His expression was calm. Too calm. To their left sat her father. Sorenik Skathe's eyes flicked up only once as she entered. Then away. Sorenik was already there. He leaned against one of the carved wolfstone pillars near the chamber's edge, arms folded, face unreadable. He said nothing. His presence, like always, coiled into the room without permission. Eryndis stepped into the circle. She kept her shoulders back, her hands steady at her sides, though the blood bond beneath her collarbone pulsed like a second heartbeat. Mocking her. Anchoring her. Dareth was the first to speak. "Elders," he said smoothly, "we gather today not to punish, but to protect. Not to accuse, but to assess. Lies already." He gestured to the relic table, where a crystal shard glowed faintly in the center, bone memory conduit. Forbidden in judgment sessions unless sanctioned by full council vote. Presenting ancestral memory recall, he said, with mock reverence. From the bone scriptorium. The shard flickered. Then it began to speak. Projected in bone-white light across the chamber was a distorted image, Eryndis kneeling beside Sorenik in the dark. Her hand on the altar. His hand on her throat. Her eyes wide. It looked like submission. Or worse. Twisted, she said aloud. "That's not how it happened." Murmurs rose from the elders. Dareth lifted a hand. "The bond mark has affected her memory. The footage is objective." "It's not." He turned to them. "What we see is an heir compromising the sanctity of ancestral relics. Aligning herself with a blood-branded exile. Acting outside right or permission." Eryndis moved forward. "I was attacked that night. Ambushed. By your guards. Is that what he told you?" Dareth asked softly. "The exile you've now bound yourself to?" Her fists clenched. "You're the one who orchestrated the trial. You wanted the mark to bind. You wanted to control me." More murmurs. Dareth spread his arms. "If I were as manipulative as you claim, would I not have erased the mark entirely? I brought it before the council. I allowed the trial to occur under open witness. Because you knew what the moon would do." She looked toward her father. He wasn't looking back. "Father." He shifted. "Eryndis," he said at last, voice low, "these are not small accusations." Her throat tightened. "You were there. You saw the truth. You know what this is." "I know what I want to believe." His voice cracked. "But I am bound to protect the unity of the bloodline." Her breath caught. So that was it. Not even a denial. Just a step back. Dareth turned to the council. "In light of what we've seen, I propose the suspension of Eryndis Skathe's heir status, effective immediately. I recommend full seclusion, pending her willingness to unbind the mark and release herself from the exile's influence." Her vision blurred, not from tears. From fury. "I didn't choose him," she hissed. "You forced this." Sorenik hadn't moved. She turned sharply. "Say something." He met her gaze. His eyes were cold. Flat. "I didn't bring you here," he said simply. "I'm not the one who needs to answer." Something cracked inside her. Not a physical wound. Something deeper. A fracture of belief. She looked back to the elders. "Then hear me clearly," she said, voice steady despite the shaking in her bones. "You fear the bond because it wasn't yours to command. You call me corrupted, but you bred the disease. And I will not burn for your failures." An eerie silence fell. Then Dareth spoke, quiet but clear. By council decree, a trial of inheritance shall be held. Blood moon rising. 3 weeks. The elder in the center nodded solemnly. If the accused proves herself uncorrupted, the heirship stands. If not, exile, Darieth finished. Permanently. If she remains alive. Eryndis stepped back, the chamber spinning. Morik did not rise. Sorenik did not follow. She turned without waiting for dismissal and walked out of the council chamber into the frigid air of dusk. The mountain winds tore at her cloak, but she didn't feel them. She felt nothing. Except alone. Truly, finally alone. Chapter 7. The Beast's Embrace. The walls were whispering again. No, they weren't walls. They were bones, stacked inside her skull, pressing inward like a cage grown from within. Eryndis clawed at her chest. It was past midnight, the exile quarters sunk in deep, breathless dark. No fire burned in her hearth. No oil lamp flickered. Only the haze of moonlight slipped through the narrow slit of a window, painting her in silver like an unburied ghost. She lay curled on the floor, blankets discarded, damp hair plastered to her face. The mark on her neck pulsed like a wound reopened. The bond had gone quiet these last few days, silent in the way a beast goes still before it strikes. Until tonight. The hum had started slowly. Then the pressure. Now the screaming. Inside her head. Not hers. Her mother's. Help me. Eryndis. They're burning me again. She gasped and curled tighter, fingers digging into the stone beneath her as if she could tunnel out of her own mind. Why didn't you save me? Why did you stand and watch? No, no, she whispered. You're not real. You're not. The bone voice surged. Claws in her blood. Fire behind her ribs. Iron in her throat. She bit her lip hard enough to taste copper. Maybe that was the way. Maybe if she bled enough, the voice would stop. Maybe if she let go. A hand caught her wrist. Cold. Rough. Real. Don't. His voice was low, but not gentle. Sorenik knelt beside her, shirt half undone, breath sharp. There were claw marks along his forearms, fresh. Self-inflicted. His eyes glowed faintly red. Half shifted. She tried to yank her hand away. He didn't let her. You're hallucinating, he said. It's pulling from the bond. The trauma. The resonance. I know what it is, she hissed. Let me go. You're going to break something inside yourself that doesn't grow back. Good. His jaw clenched. Without warning, he slid his arm under her back and lifted her like she weighed nothing. She kicked, cursed, twisted. Put me down. He didn't. He carried her toward the central stone platform where the furs lay, still rumpled from his own earlier sleep. Then he dropped to his knees and dragged her against him, hard, one hand pressing the back of her head to his chest, the other locking around her waist. She thrashed. He didn't loosen his grip. Breathe with me. Go to hell. I already live there. She sobbed, half laughing through the sound, body shaking against his. I don't want you, she said through her teeth. I don't want this. You don't get a choice. He tightened his hold. Listen, he growled. Your heart's a war drum right now. Mine's the only thing loud enough to match it. So match it. Her head pounded. Still, she tried. Inhale. Exhale. His ribs rose and fell beneath her cheek. She closed her eyes. Matched him. Once. Then again. Slowly, the phantom heat began to wane. The whispering softened. The screaming stopped. She went still. Not limp. Not surrendered. But still. And he didn't let her go. For a long time, they stayed like that. She hated the way her body fit against his. Hated the feel of his bare skin beneath her hands, the scent of wolf and wind and violence that clung to him. Hated that her bones were no longer screaming. And that he had done that. Only him. His hand slid from her waist to the curve of her back. Not in comfort. Possession. I hate you, she whispered, breath catching. He didn't move. I know, he said. But you breathe easier when I'm here. She tried to push back. His grip flexed. "I'm not your cage," he said. "I'm the one thing holding the lock closed." Her voice was barely audible. "What happens when you let go?" He leaned in, mouth near her ear, lips not touching, just the echo of heat. "You die." Her hands clenched in the furs beneath them. "You think you're necessary." "I am." She turned her face toward him. Their noses nearly touched. Her eyes burned with fury. His burned with something worse, restraint. She hated how close his mouth was, and how much of her wanted him to close the gap. But he didn't. Instead, he pulled back, just enough to look her fully in the face. "You live," he said, "because I don't want you dead." Yet? Then he released her. She staggered back, breathless, throat tight. He stood and walked away without another word, his back marked with shadow stripes of veins that hadn't been there before. High above, on the roofline of the adjoining tower, Darieth stood beneath the stars. He had watched the whole thing through the crack in the quarter's upper stone. He exhaled slowly, the fog of his breath curling around a smile. "Good," he whispered. "The more you need him, the faster you'll break." Chapter 8, Sister's Shadow. The moon's art garden was quieter than usual. Here, beneath the twisted roots of ash-barked trees and silver-leaf blossoms that only bloomed under cracked moonlight, the air always felt suspended, like breath held too long. It was the one place in Skathe Keep that had not been claimed by bone, blood, or war. Once, it had been their sanctuary. Eryndis stood at the garden's edge, arms folded tight, eyes closed against the wind. The mark on her neck had settled, cooled in the wake of her last collapse. But inside, she was still cracking. She had heard the rumors, whispers that she had begun to fracture. That the bond with Sorenik had made her wild. That the bone voice had burrowed too deep. None of them mattered. Only one voice did. And it was coming up the garden path now. Eryndis. She turned. Lyanna stood beneath the arch of dusk blooming vines, cloak drawn tight, hair braided in the traditional pattern of mourning. She looked thinner, sharper, more grown than Eryndis remembered. Her eyes, still green as ice-rimmed moss, held a shadow that hadn't been there before. Eryndis felt the air leave her lungs in a silent rush. "You came." Lyanna stepped forward, tentative. "I shouldn't have. But you did." The silence stretched. Eryndis motioned toward one of the stone benches beneath the moonpetal tree. "Sit." Lyanna hesitated. Then did. They sat shoulder to shoulder, not touching. "Not yet." "I miss you," Eryndis said. Lyanna's lips parted, but no words came. The silence spoke louder than denial. "I know what they're saying," Eryndis continued, voice quieter. "That I've turned. That I chose him." "You did bond," Lyanna said softly. "I was forced. You didn't break it." Eryndis turned sharply. "Do you know what that would do to me? They say if it was unnatural, it wouldn't have marked you." "They?" Eryndis echoed. "Who are they, Lyanna?" No answer. Eryndis looked down at her hands. Pale, calloused. Hands that had healed wounds, carved bone, buried their mother. Hands that had once taught Lyanna how to bind bloodvine and braid ritual herbs. "They've turned you," she said, quieter now. "I can hear it in your voice." "No," Lyanna whispered. "No one turned me." Eryndis looked up, eyes burning. "Then why do you look at me like a stranger?" Lyanna's hands twisted in her lap. "I don't know what to believe anymore. I'm your sister. That doesn't mean you're not dangerous." The words landed like a slap. Eryndis recoiled, breath catching. "Who told you that?" she asked, voice shaking. Lyanna didn't answer. But Eryndis already knew. Darieth stood at the edge of the garden, unseen in the folds of shadow, a scentless blur against the moonlight. He had lured Lyanna here with a dream. A whisper at her bedside. A flicker of her mother's voice. Then her father's. And a promise, see your sister for what she is. He had fed her the illusion slowly, carefully. Let her believe she saw Eryndis walk with Sorenik through the forbidden halls. Let her hear her sister's voice echoing names of the dead with reverence. Let her feel the dread of waking from a dream soaked in black ash and cold bone. The most dangerous lies were the ones you swore came from your own mind. Darieth smiled faintly, fingers pressed to the carved wolfstone beside him. One crack in the root always finds the heart of the tree. Back beneath the moon-petaled tree, Eryndis had gone still. "You're afraid of me," she said. Lyanna blinked rapidly. "No, you are. You look at me and see the monster they're trying to paint. I look at you and I don't know what I see. I'm still your sister. You don't act like her. Because I'm fighting. For what? For us. For this family. For the truth. For our mother's name not to be carved out of the record like she never mattered. She betrayed the council. She loved us," Eryndis shouted. Lyanna flinched. The words hung in the air like a wound. Eryndis looked down. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet. "Do you really think I wanted this?" She touched the mark at her neck. "Do you think I wanted to be chained to a man who doesn't see me as anything but a curse?" Lyanna didn't answer. "I'm not what they've told you," Eryndis said. "Please. You know me." "I knew you," Lyanna said quietly. Eryndis felt her heart sink. She reached out. Lyanna didn't move away. But she didn't reach back either. They sat that way for a long moment, sister and sister, close enough to touch, too far to bridge. Then Lyanna stood. Eryndis rose with her, desperation clawing at her chest. "I don't care what they've shown you," she said. "I need you to believe me." Lyanna met her eyes. And in a voice that didn't sound entirely like her own said, "Maybe father was wrong." Eryndis froze. "What?" "Maybe," Lyanna's fingers clenched at her side. "Maybe the alpha blood should have passed to me." A beat of silence. Then she turned and walked away, cloak trailing behind her like a shadow torn loose from light. Eryndis remained standing beneath the moon-petaled tree, the white blossoms shedding around her like falling ash. And she understood, finally, truly, that love would not save them. Because some roots, once poisoned, only grow deeper into rot. Chapter 9, Trial of Thorns. The thorn arena was alive. It breathed. It pulsed. It watched. Eryndis stood at its edge as the final incantations were murmured behind her, a single wolf's fang pressed into the center of her spine by the eldest priestess's hand. The fang was not sharp. It didn't need to be. It was a symbol, not a weapon. The real weapons awaited her inside. Above, the shattered moon hung in pieces, casting silver shards of light through the interlacing roots that formed the arena's tangled dome. The maze was grown from moonshadow thorn, vines that had once been used to bind traders before they were cast into the wild. Now, the vines twisted and reformed with the trial's breath, as though remembering. "Step forward," said Sorenik Veythar, voice void of anything resembling warmth. Eryndis did. Her boots crossed the threshold. The vines parted, hissing softly, and the world behind her, her father, the council, the stone, vanished. The trial had begun. The first step inside was lightless. The second, breathless. By the third, the ground was pulsing beneath her soles. The roots grew wet. Slippery. They twisted around her ankles. She yanked free, steadying her breathing. She could hear it already. The bone voice. It was no longer a hum. It was a scream. "Why didn't you stop them? You watched her burn. You begged for her silence. You killed her, daughter." "No," she whispered. She reached for the dagger at her thigh, not to wield, but to feel. Its weight grounded her. Iron and ash, forged by her mother's own hands. It was real. The voice was not. The maze twisted left. She followed. Then down. She stumbled. Thorns scraped her shins. Blood warmed her calves. She pushed forward. Above the arena, in the observer's gallery carved from old lunar stone, Darieth stood beside Sorenik, his arms folded behind his back. "She is already unraveling," he said softly. Sorenik's jaw tensed. "She has always been strong." She was, Darieth agreed. Until the exile fractured her marrow. Now all she hears is ghosts. "You know this is not meant to be sabotaged." Darieth smiled faintly. You mistake redirection for sabotage. You place the mother's voice in the path. No, he turned. I simply reminded the thorns what she fears. Morik said nothing. He watched his daughter disappear into another wall of silver roots. He did not call out. Farther back in the shadows, arms folded, eyes unreadable, Sorenik leaned against a pillar. He had been offered the right to enter if she failed. He hadn't accepted. Because he needed to know. Was she anything more than the bones she spoke to? Or would she become just another voice that begged for help when it was already too late? Eryndis stumbled again. Her breath tore at her chest. The vines were shifting beneath her, trying to trick her balance, trying to make her crawl. But she refused. One hand on the bark, she pushed to her feet. The voices grew louder. Her mother's scream. The smell of charred bone. The echo of crackling flesh. And then, Lyanna's voice. She stood there. Did nothing. I saw her. I saw her eyes. No, Eryndis gasped. No, you didn't. You watched. She slammed her hand into the tree wall beside her. Blood-smeared bark. The roots coiled tighter around her legs. She was being dragged. Still, she fought. Memory was drowning her. But there, buried beneath it, another voice. Small. Young. Hers. Mama, if I scream, will you come back? Her knees hit the ground. She screamed. Not in pain, but to shatter the illusion. The maze trembled. The vine shuddered. She shoved herself upright. I loved her, she shouted into the dark. I never stopped. Even when they said she was unclean. Even when they made me lie. Silence fell. Sharp. Clean. The path split. Light bled through. And she walked. The world returned in stages. The roar of the bone drums overhead. The smell of smoke and blood and ash. She stepped through the threshold, her hair soaked, her knees raw, a trail of blood behind her. She didn't stumble. She strode. Eyes burning. Mouth closed. She was done begging. And the council stared. Some in shock. Some in fear. Sorenik didn't move. But his gaze locked on hers. And something unreadable passed between them. Not victory. Not pride. Recognition. She had not died in the maze. But something else had. Something weaker. Darieth stepped forward, voice full of poison. The trial is complete, he said. But not without consequence. He held up a crystal. Bone mirror. Eryndis felt her stomach twist. This was recovered from within the vines, he said. A record of resonance. The crystal flickered to life. A voice played. Her voice. Breathing hard. Half delirious. I swear it whispered. Let the silver moon take my soul, if only she would stop screaming. Gasps rippled across the arena. Darieth turned, triumphant. You all heard it. She invoked the silver moon pact. Eryndis staggered forward. That's a lie. You spoke the words. I was breaking a vision. I was trapped. The thorns heard, he said. Sorenik moved. Just a step. But it was enough to silence the entire council. Darieth's smile slipped. Sorenik's voice was low. Even. I heard her scream, too. Darieth turned. Then you should know. I know illusions. I know the difference between swearing fealty and begging for silence. Eryndis looked at him. Really looked. And for the first time, she saw it. He hadn't moved to save her. But he had listened. And in the end, maybe that was more dangerous. Darieth's voice sharpened. She invoked a forbidden bond. She survived your maze. She spoke to the wrong moon. Then let the moons decide, Sorenik said. Eryndis didn't flinch. She bled. She burned. But she stood. Because they would not take her name. Not yet. Not ever. Chapter 10. Burned by his blood. The chamber beneath the exile quarters smelled of iron and heat. Not warmth, burn. The kind of heat that came from blood boiled too long, from old stone soaked through with memory. The kind of heat that curled under your skin and reminded you that pain was a ritual, and rituals always left scars. Eryndis stood at the center of the bloodbath chamber, stripped to her linen shift, arms bare and feet cold against the stone basin carved in ancient, spiraling runes. The basin's purpose was older than the keep itself, a sacred vessel used to cleanse corrupted marks, to overwrite tainted bonds, to renew a soul with fire when prayer failed. It had only ever been used 3 times in the past 100 years. All 3 had left the subject half mad. Sorenik leaned against the threshold, arms crossed, eyes unreadable. "This is a mistake," he said. "You think I don't know that? You think it'll fix what's wrong in your head?" "No," Eryndis murmured, staring at the bone-carved drain below her feet. "But it might shut the voices up long enough to let me sleep." He said nothing. She turned toward him, chin high, defiant despite the pallor in her face. "You said your blood could ground it. That it burns through echo. That's what this rite needs." Sorenik didn't move. "Say it again," she demanded. "Say you'll do it." He pushed off the wall and stepped into the room, the door sealing behind him with a hollow groan. "I'll do it," he said flatly. "But I won't be gentle." "Good," she said. "I don't want gentle." He stopped a few feet away, eyes narrowing slightly. "You want to be saved or scarred? Don't pretend like there's a difference." He stared at her for a long moment, then nodded. "Lie down." She did. The stone was cold. Her breath misted. The basin beneath her curved around her shoulders like a coffin made of memory. Sorenik stepped to the edge of the basin, stripping his gloves, bearing the faded bone marks etched into his forearms. He took out the ceremonial blade, a thin silver edge honed to split a single strand of hair. Without a word, he sliced across his palm. The blood that spilled was not red. It was darker, thicker. It shimmered with something that moved on its own, like smoke trapped in liquid. She tensed as he leaned over her. He dipped 2 fingers into the blood, then reached down, pressing it to the pulse point at her neck. The burn was immediate. A lash of heat, like wildfire coiling through her veins, exploding from the mark outward. She screamed. Her back arched. He grabbed her wrist, held it down. "Breathe," he said through gritted teeth. But she couldn't. The blood was everywhere now, coursing through her, burning her open from the inside. And then it happened. The room broke. Not in sound or space, but in memory. She saw. Not herself. Him. A boy, rag-wrapped and shivering in the shadow of a torn-down banner. The edge of the Skathe crest burned black. His knuckles raw from clawing through frost-bitten dirt. His mouth bloody from biting it closed, hiding the scream when the bones seared him for defiance. And then the bindings. The exile marks. The scent of his own blood left to soak the collar they forced him to wear. She gasped. And then she saw herself. Kneeling in the bone scriptorium at 9 years old, bone stylus in hand, tracing her mother's femur. Trying to read the grooves when no one was looking. The moment her finger brushed the carved howl, and the voice sang in her skull for the first time. The terror. The wonder. The voice of the dead calling her home. Their memories collided. Twisted. Merged. Suddenly they weren't lying and standing, they were together, pressed against a memory that didn't know which of them it belonged to. She was in the snow. He was in the bone chamber. She was begging the voice to stop. He was begging her to make it speak. And then, silence. A flash. And they both gasped. The room slammed back into place like a breath held too long. Eryndis lay limp, sweat-soaked, vision spotted. Sorenik leaned against the stone, his palm still bleeding, his jaw tight, chest heaving. She turned her face toward him. "You saw it," she whispered. He didn't answer. "My mother." Still no answer. Her voice broke. "You saw me." Slowly, he nodded. She didn't know why that made her throat close. Maybe because it was the first time someone else had seen her fully and hadn't looked away. She closed her eyes. "You hate me." "I don't have the luxury of hating you," he said. "Not anymore." She reached for his wrist, just barely, her fingers brushing the blood, still wet on his skin. "You let me see you." I didn't mean to. You bled into me. You begged for it. A pause. Then, softer. Would you do it again? No. She opened her eyes. He looked down at her. And lied. Unless you asked. She didn't have the strength to answer. Sleep was pulling at her hard and deep. Her fingers curled loosely into the furs beneath her, skin still stinging with the imprint of him, breath still tinged with his blood. As the dark took her, her voice slipped out in a whisper she didn't mean to speak aloud. Don't go. She didn't hear him move. Didn't hear him sit beside the basin. Didn't hear the way he leaned his head back against the stone wall, watching her like something dangerous and breakable all at once. But when morning came, he was still there. Chapter 11. The Mirror of Her Sins. The silver didn't ripple. It shimmered, waiting. Lyanna stood barefoot at the edge of the silver pool garden, hem of her robe soaked with dew, moonlight painting her in the same pale sheen as the ceremonial mirror that floated before her. It was a mirror made of water, not glass. Forged by ancient rites, held together by bone magic, and called to stillness only by one voice. Darieth's. He stood behind her now, one hand hovering just above her shoulder, never quite touching. His breath was warm. His tone was silk. All you must do is look. Lyanna swallowed. I don't want to see her pain. You won't, he said softly. You'll see her truth. The surface of the silver shimmer broke apart, slowly, deliberately, and memory bled forth like smoke from a broken seal. The garden went silent. And the visions began. Eryndis in the bone scriptorium, hands trembling, stylus falling as the bones howl turned into a scream. Too late, too loud, too dangerous. Another flicker. A younger Eryndis, standing beside their dying mother's cot, refusing to take the final right stone. I won't repeat her mistakes, the memory Eryndis spat. The bone voice cursed her. It won't take me to. And then, a soldier falling. Blood spraying across the garden path as Eryndis spun, her power arcing uncontrolled. Her face pale with horror. Her mouth silent with guilt. She meant to protect, Lyanna whispered. Did she? Darieth said, stepping closer. She walked away from the deathbed of the only woman who loved her. That's not how it happened. And yet, this is the memory embedded in her marrow. You saw it. The pool doesn't lie. Memories can be twisted. Not by me, he said. Only by her. The mirror faded. Lyanna stared at her own reflection now. She barely recognized the girl looking back. Why would she lie to me? She whispered. Not out of malice, Darieth said gently. Out of fear. Fear that you would surpass her. That the bloodline might favor you. Lyanna turned to him. She loved me. And still she left you behind, he said. Even now, when she speaks of strength, it's always hers. Lyanna didn't answer. He stepped even closer. The bloodline demands clarity, Lyanna. And clarity is often cruel. The next day, whispers rippled through the keep like wildfire beneath silk. Lyanna Skathe, the quiet one, the soft-voiced shadow, had seen. And what she saw, she told. She withheld the right stone, one murmured. She let her mother die unblessed, another added. She struck one of our own, someone else breathed. She's possessed. The last word hit Eryndis hardest. She heard it first in the corridor outside the archive hall. Then again in the bathing chamber. Then, finally, when she walked into the garden to find Lyanna waiting for her. Face solemn. Back straight. Flanked by two of the elder's aides. You've been busy, Eryndis said, voice low. I only told what I saw, Lyanna replied. You saw lies. I saw memories. Yours. They weren't real. Lyanna's chin lifted. They were real enough. Eryndis stepped closer. Tell me, when did he come to you? Before or after the trial? Lyanna didn't flinch. Darieth didn't twist anything. Then you're already twisted. The aides shifted at that, but didn't move. Eryndis turned her gaze on them. You stand beside a child and call her heir? She stands without poison in her blood, one said. A ripple of laughter echoed from the path behind her. She turned and found a small crowd gathered. Council staff, observers, lower clan betas, watching, listening. Darieth stepped forward, robes whispering over the stone. She speaks from pain, he said smoothly. Let us not punish the wound when it is the infection we must name. I wasn't infected, Eryndis snapped. No? He lifted the bone mirror. Then why does your voice still sing in the pool? I was set up. Then face your equal, he said. That silenced her. He turned to the crowd. The final test of inheritance will not be judged by voices from the grave. It will be settled here now, in the present, by blood and will. He smiled. Sister against sister. In the moonbind ring. On the eve of the next full howl. The crowd gasped. Lyanna's face went pale. Eryndis stared. You want me to fight her? She said coldly. She deserves the chance you were given, Darieth said. And you deserve to prove you didn't steal it. Silence settled. Lyanna looked away. Eryndis turned and walked off, her cloak snapping in the wind. She didn't speak again. But inside, something cracked. Not her rage. Not her grief. Her hope. Chapter 12, Heat of the Unspoken. The collapsed sanctum still stank of bone ash and betrayal. What remained of the once sacred space had been cordoned off since the night of red smoke, when part of the old Moonbind chapel caved in during a ritual gone wrong. But even now, years later, the stones still bore scorch marks, and the scent of scorched marrow lingered beneath every broken archway. No one came here anymore, which made it the perfect place to hide her. Eryndis sat alone on the shattered edge of an altar, wrists raw from the silver-threaded cuffs they'd insisted she wear for safety. She hadn't seen another soul in hours. She hadn't spoken aloud since morning. And she hadn't slept, not really, since they'd announced the sister duel. Every breath was a tether threatening to snap. She heard the footsteps before she saw him. One sharp, heavy step. Then another. She rose, spine straightening with a jolt. The moment he appeared from the smoke-tinted shadows of the collapsed entryway, her body reacted, shoulders stiff, mouth tightening. Sorenik, you're not supposed to be here, she said flatly. Neither are you. Her fists clenched. They barred you. They bar everything they fear. You barged into council-guarded territory. I don't give a damn what they guard. You should. Because they're watching. Waiting for you to snap. His eyes gleamed in the half-light. Let them. He stepped closer, the moonlight fractured by the broken stained glass above. His face was dusted with soot. A faint line of dried blood traced his jaw. I didn't come to fight, he said. Then what? I came to get you out. She blinked. Out. There's a path, beneath the burial tunnels. If we leave tonight, by next dusk we can reach the hollow reaches. Past the ridgeline, they can't chase us. She stared. Then laughed, hollow and sharp. You want me to run? He didn't blink. I want you alive. You think I'm safer with you than I am here? Yes. You think I trust you? No, he said. But I don't need your trust. Just your decision. You don't get to make offers like that without answering me first. He frowned. Answering what? She stepped forward, inches away now. Is this about the bond? About obligation? Or is this your way of twisting the knife into a tribe that threw you out? His jaw tightened. I don't. Tell me the truth, she snapped. When you mark me, when you bleed for me, when you look at me like I'm the last living thing you understand, is it me, or is it the ghost of everything they denied you? Silence. A long one. She saw his throat work. Then his voice, low and unsteady. It was you the moment you said no one else had ever seen you. Her chest cracked. But she wasn't done. And when you kiss me, when you pull me into that burn and don't let go, do you want to save me, or destroy me just enough so I never leave? His breath caught. And then he grabbed her. Fist in her collar, mouth crashing against hers, not with hunger, not with lust, but with fury. Teeth clashed. She bit him. Hard. Blood burst against her tongue. He hissed, but didn't pull back. Instead, He shoved her against the half-crumbled column behind them, hands braced to either side of her head. She grabbed his wrist and dug in, nails dragging against a pulse that throbbed too fast. "Feel it," he growled. "Feel what you do to me." She shoved him back, only for him to pull her harder against him. They weren't kissing anymore. They were fighting in the shape of closeness. It wasn't tender. It was brutal. It was burning. His blood ran from her lip where she'd bitten too deep. Her hands shook against his chest where his heart tried to beat its way out. "Why won't you let me go?" she whispered. "Because you know I'm the only one who wants you for you. Not your name. Not your power. I hate you. I can survive that." She pushed again. Harder. He let her. She stumbled away, back toward the altar stone, panting, arms shaking. Her voice came hollow. "I'd rather die in the bone crypt than live as your shadow." He stared at her for a long moment, and then, without another word, turned and walked out the way he came. Alone. Later, long after she'd collapsed against the altar and sleep dragged her under, he sat in the dust outside, back to a broken pillar, one knee up, elbow resting against it. The blood from his lip had dried, but something worse had spread. A vein of black, thin as thread, now reached from his jaw to just beneath his eye. He pressed 2 fingers to it, felt the heat, and whispered into the silence, "You'll come back. You have to." He didn't say what would happen if she didn't, because he already knew. Chapter 13. Blood Debt Unpaid. The Crimson Hall was carved from the ribcage of an elder moon beast, its arched ceiling formed by vertebrae so massive that even the echoes sounded like the breathing of a long-dead god. Red stone walls bore the markings of every oath sealed in blood for the last 5 centuries. And now, Eryndis Skathe stood beneath them, eyes fixed on the judgment about to be passed. Sorenik was shackled. The silver cuffs glowed with suppression sigils, old ones, crafted for the mad and the cursed. He didn't flinch, didn't shift, didn't speak. He stood like he'd already died once, and was only waiting to be dismissed again. Sorenik Veythar sat at the head of the Elder Circle, his face carved from the same stone as the hall. His robes were the dark slate of mourning, a color he had worn too often since her mother's death, and never once taken off for her sake. Beside him, Eryndis Skathe smirked like a man who'd already won. He violated restricted sanctum, one elder declared. Armed and unpermitted, he entered a sacred confinement chamber without council notice. He crossed the border of exile in direct violation of ancestral law. Punishment, Eryndis said smoothly, is unnegotiable. Return him to the mist shadow wastes. Let the exile complete itself. Sorenik remained still. Eryndis stepped forward. "No." The word dropped like a sword into the chamber. All heads turned. Her father's voice, low and heavy, carried across the silence. "Speak carefully, daughter." She didn't blink. "I invoke the blood debt oath." A ripple went through the circle. One elder stood. "That right has not been claimed in a generation. It was not forbidden. It was forgotten." "Then remember it now," Eryndis said, voice steady. "If you send him to die, you mark me alongside him." Eryndis laughed softly. "You don't know what you're saying." "I do," she snapped. "I am his bondmate. That link was forged by the trial. If he dies at your hand, I claim his death as a debt you owe me." "The law does not protect exile-marked blood." "No," she said. "But it does honor blood once merged." Silence. Even Sorenik's eyes flicked toward her, just once. Eryndis stepped in front of him. Not behind. Not beside. In front. "I do not ask this because I'm bound to him," she said. "I ask it because your judgment is wrought. Because this is not about law, it's about control." She looked at her father. "Say it," she challenged. "Say that you value my life. That my word is still Skathe." Sorenik's face did not move for a long time. Then, finally, "You speak like one already severed. I speak like someone who still bleeds when you cut." He stood. The hall fell silent. His voice echoed with finality. "Sorenik will not be returned to the wastes." Eryndis's jaw tightened. Morik turned to Eryndis. But you, he said, you who shield a wolf we cast out, who lift a blade for a bond we never wanted, you forget your name. Your line. Your blood. I remember it, she said. Every night. Then remember this, too, he said coldly. You may still wear our name, but you no longer carry our trust. It hit harder than she expected. But she didn't flinch. Instead, she stepped back beside Sorenik, chin high. Only then did he speak. You shouldn't have done that. I did. I didn't need your saving. I wasn't saving you. He stared at her. For the first time, no smirk came. No cruel smile. No sharp retort. Just silence. And something else. Recognition. They walked out of the Crimson Hall together, the murmurs behind them hushed and furious. Outside, the wind howled against the stone courtyard, carrying whispers that would soon become fire. From the balcony above, Lyanna watched. And beside her, Darieth leaned close, voice a breath in her ear. She's stepping into his shadow now, he said. And it will devour her. She won't let him control her, Lyanna said, uncertain. No, Darieth murmured. But it's not control I'm counting on. His smile turned sharper. She doesn't need to love him. She only needs to need him. And then he'll break her for us. Chapter 14. Bones Do Not Lie. The forgotten ossuary reeked of close time. A place beneath the roots of the keep, deeper even than the bloodbath chamber, deeper than the frost vaults. It had been locked for 17 winters. Not sealed by stone, but by silence, no rites sung, no guards posted. That kind of abandonment only happened when a memory became too dangerous to hold. And now Eryndis stood in its center. Alone, save for the bones. They were arranged in rows along the arching walls, femurs stacked like ribs of an unwalled cathedral, skulls embedded in black moss like mourners who had grown into the stone. She had not been here since her mother's body was laid out, flesh stripped clean by bone beetles, voice sealed in marrow. Eryndis, came the low voice from the stairwell. She turned, but did not lift the blade from her palm. She had already drawn blood. Her thumb pressed into the wound, deepening the flow. She'd need more. Sorenik stepped from the shadows, expression unreadable. Do they know you're here? He asked. They think I'm in silent prayer. Preparing for the duel. He looked around the chamber, lips curling at the scent. This isn't prayer. No, she murmured. This is the opposite. She knelt beside a low altar carved from marrow stone. A single ulna rested at its center, her mother's. The bone was faintly yellowed, its ridges smoothed from time and reverent handling. But the grooves remained. Whisper-thin notches running along the shaft. The bone voice was embedded here. And she would summon it. Sorenik crouched beside her. Show me the cut, he said. She extended her hand. He inspected the wound. Not deep enough. Not for what you're trying. It's mine to bear. He didn't argue. Instead, he took the blade, sliced his own palm, and pressed it to the base of the bone. What are you doing? She asked, startled. His breath was slow. Lending you the fracture, he said. My blood's already broken. It'll carry the echo better than yours. You don't have to. I'm not doing it for the mark. She stared. Then looked away. The blood began to seep down the altar stone. When it reached the bone, the grooves hummed. Not in sound. In pressure. A rising static behind her eyes. A flicker at the base of her skull. The ancient tongue began to form, not in words, but in pulses. Sorenik inhaled sharply. She turned. His pupils had blown wide. Dark. Deep. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment, she thought he might collapse. You need to pull out, she said. He didn't answer. Sorenik. Then the voice struck. Not his. Not hers. But hers. Her mother. If they find this memory, they'll burn it. If they find you, they'll break you from within. Darieth, he is not what he seems. He used the mirror, he turned my face against me. Eryndis gasped. He killed me with my own fear. And he'll use yours too. The bone pulsed. Then flashed. Sorenik staggered back, eyes unfocused. Eryndis caught him by the wrist before he hit the stone. His breathing was ragged. "Stop. Pull out now." But he shook his head and reached again. Not for the bone. For her hand. He gripped it tight and pressed it to the grooves, anchoring her as the second wave came. Not memory. Warning. "You weren't chosen, Eryndis." The voice rasped, deeper now, almost not her mother's at all. "You were hunted." The bones split down the middle, and the light went out. She yanked her hand back, heart slamming in her chest. Sorenik slumped to the ground, back against the wall, fingers twitching. "Sorenik." His eyes fluttered. "I can't see," he said, voice hoarse. "What?" He blinked again, but his pupils didn't contract. She knelt in front of him. His irises were clouded, ringed with the same fracture veins that had begun to form near his neck days ago. "You burned too deep," she whispered. "I anchored the resonance," he said through clenched teeth. "If I hadn't, it would have cracked your mind open. You didn't ask." "I didn't need to. I know what those bones mean to you." Her throat closed. She stared at him, eyes wide, stripped. "I didn't ask you to bleed for me. I didn't need you to. I didn't want." "But you needed it," he said. "Didn't you?" She didn't answer, only looked away. A beat passed. Then she stood, walked toward the altar, and said quietly over her shoulder, "Next time, don't decide for me." He said nothing, didn't follow, couldn't. But he smiled faintly where she couldn't see, even as the darkness remained thick in his sight. She still hadn't told him to leave. She still hadn't walked away. Hours later, long after she'd vanished into the upper keep, Sorenik remained sitting in the shadows of the ossuary. His eyes were closed, not because of the pain, but because of the truth. In his mind, the echo of her mother's last whisper still looped. "You weren't chosen. You were hunted." And now he understood. The bloodline hadn't marked Eryndis because it needed her. It had marked her because she was easy to trap, easy to control, and they'd used him to do it. Chapter 15, Echoes Beneath Her Skin. The snow didn't melt. Not here. In the silent ravine, even breath froze before it reached the air. Even blood spilled in silence. This was where broken vows were cast, where moon-marked exiles were once led to kneel, and where Eryndis now stumbled, clutching her skull as if it were cracking open from the inside. She didn't remember how she got here. One moment, the bone voice had whispered to her in the ossuary, "You were hunted, not chosen." The next, it was everyone's voice. Echoing. Screaming. "Unworthy. Your mother died for your arrogance. The blood doesn't want you. You let him mark you, and you still think you're clean?" Her knees gave out. Snow met her palms like a grave greeting flesh. Her breath came ragged, short. Her ears rang, then bled. Thin lines of red streaked down the sides of her neck. She couldn't hear herself scream, because the voices were louder. They crawled beneath her skin, scratched along the inside of her skull. Names. Accusations. Mockery. All the worst things she'd ever feared, given voice by the spirits buried beneath this cursed land. She dug her nails into the frozen ground, gasping. Something snapped behind her. Not a branch. A breath. Then, hands. She twisted, but it was already too late. Sorenik was there. He moved faster than the wind, pressing her down into the snow, pinning her spine with his chest, one hand gripping her wrists, the other curling around the back of her skull. She fought, screamed, a soundless thing. But he didn't speak. He kissed her. Hard. Not with tenderness. Not with hunger. With violence. It wasn't passion. It was a shock to the system, mouth crashing over hers, heat against frozen lips, biting, forcing breath back into her lungs. Her body seized beneath his, instinctive panic tearing through her like wildfire. And then, stillness. The pain flared through her mouth like a blade, grounding her senses in something real. Not voices. Not ghosts. Him. She gasped against him. He didn't pull back. Not yet. Only when her wrist stopped thrashing did he break the kiss, panting above her, face flushed with cold and something darker. "You're bleeding," he growled. "Your mind was breaking. I couldn't wait. Her voice broke. "You forced. I saved you." He sliced his wrist without ceremony. The blood welled, dark, glittering with fracture veins. He gripped her jaw. "I'm sorry," he said, and meant it, then forced a drop between her lips. She choked. It burned down her throat like liquid iron, and the world fell away. The snow vanished. The sky turned black. And in the space of no time, she was not in the ravine, but standing on the altar of the Moonbind ring, dressed in bone-white war robes. A blade in her hand. Blood at her feet. Across from her on his knees. Sorenik. Smiling. Not with mockery. With peace. "You finally did it," he said. "Alpha." She stared. The sword in her hand dripped red. His blood. She'd cut his throat. And he'd let her. In the dream, she dropped the blade and ran to him. Caught him just before he fell. His voice was a rasp. "Now you're free." Then, silence. And cold. She gasped awake. The snow burned her skin where it pressed into the curves of her arms and neck. Her lungs heaved. Her body shook. Sorenik still knelt over her, hand braced in the snow beside her head, his wrist half healed, the blood gone from her lips. "What did you do to me?" she whispered. "I gave you something stronger than the voices. You forced your way into me. To keep you whole." She slapped him. Hard. His head turned with the impact. But he didn't retaliate. Didn't even move. Her hand dropped. She lay back in the snow, chest rising too fast. And she hated that when she sagged forward, her forehead found his collarbone. "I should hate you more than I do," she murmured. "You do. I should run. Then go. I can't." "I know." Her hands clenched in the fabric of his shirt. He didn't say another word. He just held her as the wind screamed overhead, and the ravine swallowed the last of her sobs like it had swallowed so many secrets before. Chapter 16. The Chains We Choose. The cave still smelled of the beasts that once ruled it. Long dead, long vanished, yet their musk clung to the walls, buried in stone like fossilized fear. The wraithbound cave had been sealed when Eryndis was a child, marked unfit for habitation. Wolves had whispered that a phantom pack had nested here, shadow things with no flesh, only hunger. Their bones had never been found. Only claw marks gouged deep into the cavern walls, as though the stone itself had tried to scream. It was the perfect place to hide. Eryndis sat against the far wall, arms curled around her knees, cloak still wet with melted snow. Her throat burned. Her lips were raw. Her head pounded from what she had seen in the ravine, the dream of Sorenik's death, his smile as her blade opened his throat. She wanted to forget, but the bone voice replayed it, whispering her guilt like it had rehearsed for centuries. "You're trembling," came his voice. She lifted her eyes. Sorenik crouched near the entrance, blood still seeping faintly from the fracture veins near his temples. He didn't look at her. He was drawing something in the dirt with his claw. When he finished, the lines glowed faintly red. She knew it. She hated it. A bond script. "What are you doing?" she rasped. "Marking a vow." "I didn't ask you to." He looked at her finally. His eyes were calm. Too calm. "You don't get to live without this." She pushed to her feet, every muscle stiff. "Erase it." "I can't. It's already burning." "Then I won't say the words." "You don't have to. You already did, when you let me inside your marrow." Her nails dug into her palms. "This isn't a choice." "No," he said. "It's a chain. The only one strong enough to hold you up." She glared at him. But the words stuck in her throat. The cave was silent for a long time, save for the hiss of the cold wind outside. Night fell. She thought she'd endure it. She didn't. The bone voice came back with claws sharper than before, dragging her from half-sleep into a storm of whispers. "Unfit. Blood traitor. You'll slit his throat. You already saw it." Say it. Say you want him dead. Her ears bled again. She pressed her palms over them, rocking, gasping. Stop, she begged. Stop, stop. But the voices only grew louder. Then she said it. Not to them. To him. Help me. Please. Shut them up. His shadow loomed before she even realized he had crossed the cavern. She lifted her head just enough to see him kneeling, his hands cupping her jaw, eyes dark and steady. You're sure? He asked. Just do it. His thumb pressed against the mark at her throat. The burn surged instantly, heat searing through her like molten iron poured straight into her marrow. She screamed, or tried to. No sound came out. The voices cut. Silence. Absolute. Her breath stuttered in the absence, her chest still heaving, but her skull empty. For the first time since she was 9 years old, there was nothing in her head but her own pulse. She gasped like a drowning woman yanked above water, clutching his wrist so hard she thought she might break bone. His hand didn't move. When her knees buckled, he caught her. Her mouth opened, still no sound. Her eyes widened. You're clean, he said quietly. No voice but mine. Her body shook. He let her lean against him until her breathing slowed, until the tremors turned to stillness. And only then did he lower her to the furs. She slept without screaming. When dawn slipped through the cracks of stone, she woke to a dull ache in her chest. Her voice was back. But it was different. The silence had left a mark deeper than her throat. She sat up slowly, blinking against the pale light. Sorenik sat across the cave, back against the wall, eyes closed. Why can I still feel you? She whispered. His eyes opened, calm and steady. Because I left part of me inside you. She froze. What? My blood didn't just silence the voices, he said. It stayed. A fragment. A tether to me. Permanent. Her breath stilled. You didn't tell me. You didn't ask. I didn't consent. You begged me to shut them up, he said. And I did. She stood, fists trembling. You took more than you had any right to. He rose too, towering over her now. His face was expressionless, but his voice, low, even, cut sharper than any scream. You think you want to be alpha. But you can't stand on your own marrow without cracking. You'll learn to lean, or you'll die. Her hand shook as she lifted it, half a thought to strike him, half a plea to pull him closer. She did neither. Her throat burned with words she wouldn't speak. He leaned down, close enough she could feel his breath on her ear. You're still alive because of me. Don't waste it pretending you aren't. Then he turned, stepped past her, and left her shaking in the center of the cave. That night, when the silence pressed too tight against her ribs, she reached for the bone shard he had marked with his vow. It glowed faintly where it lay buried in her pack. She bit it. Hard. Blood ran down her lips. Her teeth cracked the surface. And with her mouth full of iron, she whispered into the shadows. I won't always need you. The vow flickered. But it did not break. Not yet. Chapter 17. The Smile of the Serpent. The council dome glistened like a wound sealed in silver. Polished bone tiles lined the floors, etched with the blood lines of every alpha since the founding of the Skathe Dominion. The ceiling, glass forged from storm sand and sealed under full moons, shimmered faintly as it caught the rise of twilight beyond. But none of it shone as brightly as the mirror at the court's center. The white moon mirror. It was no longer just a relic. Tonight, it was a weapon. Lyanna stood before it barefoot, cloaked in the ceremonial drape of the Moon Daughter, silver-white robes lined with blue thread, stitched in patterns that whispered obedience into the skin. Her eyes were clear, her voice silent. And Darieth stood behind her. He was not robed in tradition. He needed no ritual to hold power. His words were the altar. His hands the blade. You're sure she's ready? Morek Skathe asked from his seat among the council's crescent. No one remembers the burden of childhood clearly, Darieth replied, voice smooth as mist. The mirror merely relieves her of unnecessary weight. Morik's jaw clenched, but he did not object. He hadn't objected to anything in weeks. The ritual had already begun. Lyanna stepped forward onto the obsidian circle surrounding the mirror. Her reflection flickered. Dariath's voice deepened, laced with command. "Name the ties you release." "I release all memory," Lyanna whispered, "of the sister who once walked beside me." "Name what replaces it." "The silver path. The will of the elders. The moon's serenity." Her reflection rippled, then shifted. Gone was the girl who once braided flowers with shaking fingers, who cried into the same bedroll as Eryndis during thunder nights, who bled her palm when they swore sisterhood beneath the blooming arch. In her place stood the silver heir. Composed. Serene. Empty. The mirror pulsed once, then went still. "It is done," Dariath said, stepping beside her. The council chamber stirred with murmurs. Elder Ravith rose. "The bloodline succession must now be reconsidered. If the current heir is unfit, the right of transfer must be invoked." "She is unfit," Dariath said simply. He turned to the elders. "I present the evidence." A low servant entered, bowing low, then unrolled a scroll inscribed with Eryndis's last sigils, erratic, spiraling, written during her last bone echo lapse. The blood ink had already begun to flake, but the madness in the curves was clear. "Signs of imprint overload," Dariath explained. "Consistent with marrow echo degeneration. She exhibits bone-induced hallucinations, emotional volatility, and has merged unauthorized blood tethers. She's bonded with an exile," another elder muttered, "and left the territory." "She is already lost," Dariath said gently. "Let us not lose the tribe with her." Morik sat motionless. Then, finally, he nodded once. Soft. Final. The room shifted. Dariath smiled. He turned to Lyanna. "Will you accept what your sister could not?" Lyanna's voice came clear and steady. "I will bring the moon's peace to our people." She smiled. And it was wrong. Too precise. Too soft. Too shaped. Dariath leaned forward, kissed her brow, and with one claw-sharp nail, pressed into the back of her neck. A flicker of silver ink laced her skin. A sigil. Small. Spiral. "You will be her shadow," he whispered, "until she drowns in it." Outside the dome, thunder cracked low in the distance. A harbinger. The council turned toward the final matter. "If Eryndis Skathe fails to return by the third nightfall from now," Ravith declared, "her alpha sigil shall be stripped. Her name shall be unspoken in record." Dariath bowed. Lyanna said nothing. Her hands rested at her sides like a doll placed in perfect posture. Only her eyes flickered once toward the mirror, where no reflection remained. Chapter 18, Teeth of the Forsaken. The wind at Bloodfang border did not whisper. It screamed. Eryndis stood just beyond the frost line where the exiled wilds met the skinned edge of ancestral land. The snow here was pink, not with cold, but with old blood, sunless and half-remembered. She stared across the ravine, past the fang-like stones that gave the place its name, to where the ancestral ridges rose like broken spines beneath a bleeding sky. Behind her, Sorenik stood motionless. "You're certain?" he asked, voice hoarse from the run. "No," she replied. "But I'm done letting others choose what I survive for." He didn't answer. She turned. "I know what they've done. I felt it. The council voted 3 nights ago," he said. "They stripped your alpha name. Reassigned it. You're a ghost walking. I'd rather haunt them than hide. They'll use you," he said, stepping closer. "Your pain. Your doubt. Your grief. They'll twist it into ceremony. Into pity. Then bury you under the pretense of order." She stared at him. "Then let them try." His jaw flexed. "I saw what's waiting for us," she said. "In the mirror. In the blood. If I run, Lyanna carries my mother's ghost to the throne, and Dariath wears my silence like a crown." Sorenik's eyes darkened. "I won't let him die laughing." That was when the snow shifted. He heard it first. So did she. The moon's hard sentinels didn't march. They glided, ghost wolves armored in silver, breathless as fog, blades curved like crescent moons. A dozen. Maybe more. They rose from the snowdrifts and surrounding hills like they had grown from the land itself, robes fluttering despite the still air. A voice rang out. By order of the elders, stand down and surrender. The traitor shall be purified. The exile returned to fracture. Sorenik pulled her back just in time. The first bolt screamed past her cheek, nicking her ear. They ran. Side by side, leaping down the ravine's incline, boots scraping frozen moss. Arrows followed, each one etched with seal sigils. If one struck them in the spine, it wouldn't kill, it would brand. Sorenik growled, shoulder checking her behind a jagged stone ledge. I count 9 ahead, he said. I'll take the left. You'll stay down. She grabbed his wrist. Don't you dare tell me to kneel now. He didn't respond. Instead, he broke left with a flash of teeth and shadow. She moved right faster than thought, her dagger singing bone rune as she sliced through the leg of a charging sentinel. Blood splattered the snow. The scent hit her like a scream. But they kept coming. 3 flanked Sorenik, fast, silent, merciless. His claws caught the first one across the throat, but not before a whip of silver tore his side open. Eryndis turned to help, just in time to see his shoulder crack under a second blow. He didn't fall, but the fracture lines in his neck flared. Deep. Spreading. His irises flickered, then dimmed. Sorenik, she screamed. He didn't hear. Or if he did, he wasn't there anymore. She ran to him as the third sentinel raised a twin blade, and threw herself over his body just before it fell. The blade caught her shoulder. She didn't care. She drew the iron dagger from her belt, her own blood smeared along the hilt, and slashed it across her palm. Then she turned him onto his side. The fracture veins across his back pulsed violently, glowing like magma beneath skin. He was halfway to madness. She only had seconds. Gritting her teeth, she plunged her fingers into the blood on her hand and began drawing the life sigil, the oldest, the forbidden. Down his spine, across the ridges of old scars, onto the deepest break near his shoulder blade. The blood hissed where it touched him. He arched, mouth opening in a silent scream. She didn't stop. When she finished the last line, the mark seared into him, burning black, then red. His body jerked and then slumped. She caught him, held him. He shuddered in her arms. Then, slowly, his eyes opened. Still wild, but lucid. You, he rasped. I'm here. You branded me. I saved your mind. He tried to sit up. Couldn't. She braced him, breath shivering. You didn't have to do this. I wanted to. Then stop wanting to die for me. He looked at her. There was blood on her mouth. Hers. His. Both. She didn't wipe it. He didn't look away. You're not mine to die for, he said. She exhaled. Then live. For you. No, she said quietly. With me. He went still. She touched the still glowing sigil at his back. It pulsed beneath her fingers, alive, raw, never to fade. I won't push you away again, she said. He swallowed hard. And nodded. Then stood. And together, they turned toward the ridgeline. Toward the ancestral stones. The wind howled as they stepped across the border of old bone, into the territory of those who had cast them out. At the far edge, near the grand ancestor hall, a figure waited. Silver-robed. Mirror in hand. Darieth. He stood atop the old ceremonial stairs, the white moon mirror turning lazily in his fingers. His voice rang across the distance. Welcome home. His smile was sharp enough to cut bone. Madwoman. His eyes shifted to Sorenik. And monster. Chapter 19. The Trial Without Mercy. The Crimson Tribunal was never built to hold mercy. Its walls were veined in petrified bloodroot, its floor polished with the ash of centuries of sentencing. The carved wolf skulls above the dais stared down at the accused with mouths locked mid-howl, permanent judgment, cast in silence. Today, the silence was broken. Eryndis Skathe stood in the center of the tribunal ring, manacled with oath iron, surrounded by dozens of her own kin. But none looked at her as one of their own. Not anymore. The crowd murmured, whispered, bone mad. She fed on exile blood, poisoned her own kin. She's not one of us. She didn't flinch. Above her, seated like a vulture carved from obsidian, Darieth Calethorn rested his chin upon his steepled fingers. To his left, her father, Morik, wore a face carved from stone, unmoving, unreadable. And beside them, veiled in silver and seated like a reflection made flesh, sat Lyanna. Eryndis looked up at her sister and saw nothing. Not a flicker of recognition. Not a twitch of shame. Only calm. Darieth's voice cut through the murmurs, laced with his usual syruped civility. Let the record show, he began, that the accused returns not as penitent heir, but as self-sworn martyr, marked by exile flame and bonded with a known fracture bringer. The crowd hissed. Eryndis lifted her chin. Your laws were carved by wolves who feared a woman's voice. Don't quote them at me. Darieth smiled. Then let us show yours. He turned his palm. The water mirror at the center of the tribunal shimmered to life. Images bloomed, distorted, dreamlike. Eryndis kneeling over a sleeping Lyanna, fingers outstretched, holding a bone-etched dagger that shimmered with poison sigils. The crowd gasped. Another flicker, Eryndis pressing her mark to Sorenik's skin, whispering, obey me. Bend for me. A final image, her reflection in the mirror, face cracked, eyes black with echo. She is possessed, came a whispered echo. She used the blood to control the exile. She has no voice of her own. That's not real, Eryndis said sharply. Darieth gave a soft sigh. Are you denying the mirror's truth? The mirror shows what you planned in it. Darieth turned. And who are they to believe? The mad heir who fled into exile, or the sister who stayed? All eyes turned to Lyanna. She stood slowly. Her face remained still. Her hands folded. I saw her hand above my throat, she said softly. I believe she wanted to silence me. The chamber exhaled. A sound like a blade sliding into sheath. You trained her to say that, Eryndis growled. I taught her peace, Darieth corrected. You taught her pain. Before the tribunal could answer, the doors slammed open. Sorenik stumbled in, breathless, blood trailing from a fresh gash along his ribs, one arm bound in fractured silver. This trial is a lie, he growled. Remove him, one of the elders barked. But he kept walking, dragging himself to the center, beside her. She didn't mark me, he said. I marked myself to ground her. She doesn't control me. I chose this. The elders rose. Darieth stood. You are a fracture vessel, he said coldly. Your testimony holds no weight. Sorenik fell to one knee. The lines along his neck flared. Cracks bloomed across his chest, glowing with the heat of strain. Eryndis turned to him. You're breaking. He smiled, weak. Worth it. Then, louder, to the council, I've seen more clarity in her madness than in all your order. Guards moved in. Blades drawn. Chains ready. Sorenik didn't resist. But as they grabbed his arms, he looked up at her, blood smeared across his mouth. Don't let them win, his lips shaped. Don't surrender. Then they dragged him away. The tribunal fell silent again. Eryndis looked up at her father. Her voice, when it came, wasn't loud, but it echoed like prophecy. What are you afraid of, father? She asked. The truth? Or the ghost of the daughter you let die? Morik didn't answer. He only lowered his eyes. Darieth stepped forward. The accused remains unrepentant. Her mind fractured, her actions treasonous. The council decrees she shall be cast into the bone vault, beneath the 1,000-wolf ossuary. 7 days. No light. No voice. No escape. The crowd did not cheer. They watched. Hungering. Lyanna didn't blink. Morik said nothing. Eryndis smiled, thin and sharp. 7 days in the dark, she whispered. Then I suppose I'll learn what kind of monster they made of me. Chapter 20. Beneath the Dead. The door shut with the sound of a jaw locking shut. No torch was left. No guard remained. Just the groan of ancient stone swallowing itself as the slab rolled back into place and sealed her in. Darkness rushed up to greet her. Eryndis didn't scream. She waited. Let her eyes adjust. But there was nothing to see, no light, no movement, only the scent of dry rot and the weight of the ossuary pressing in from every direction. She stood in the pit of 1,000 wolves. The resting place of condemned traitors, buried alphas, ancient oathbreakers whose names had been erased, but whose bones still howled beneath the earth. This was not a prison. It was a punishment. A test of sanity. Of silence. And she was already losing both. The walls seemed to breathe. Her boots crunched over brittle bones, each step echoing like a memory slammed shut. At first, she tried not to look at the skulls, some cracked, some still bearing the faint curve of ceremonial carvings. But when she did, they watched her. Even with empty sockets. You are not of us. The first voice was soft. A whisper through bone. You brought an exile inside our lines. Another joined. You let your sister be unmade. Her spine stiffened. She moved deeper, boots brushing femurs, vertebrae, shattered tibias. The air thickened. Grew hot. Then cold. Then nothing. Her mind itched. Then pulsed. She gasped and dropped to one knee. The bone echo struck. Not a whisper this time. A howl. It erupted from the marrow around her, generations of dead wolves, screaming through their broken remains. Eryndis slammed her hands to her ears, but it didn't help. The voices weren't in the air. They were in her, ripping through her skull like claws through wet parchment. She curled in on herself, chest heaving, eyes clenched shut. And then, her mother's voice. You were always too soft. She flinched. You watched me burn and did nothing. No, she choked. I was a child. You let them take your name. Let them cut your throat with lies. Stop. If you had only fought earlier, none of this would have happened. Her teeth sank into her lower lip. She tasted blood. But still, her mother's voice climbed. And it wasn't her mother. Not really. It was rage, regret, grief, all wearing the skin of memory. And it wanted her to break. And then, a shift. A thread of warmth. Not real. But not a lie either. It curled around her ribs like fire and silk. Sorenik. His voice did not cut. It wove. Through the cracks. Into her chest. Breathe. You're not alone. She gasped, but the howls only twisted louder. Get out, she whispered. You'll lose yourself. Too late for that. His echo in her mind was frayed, like distant thunder, but anchored. Let me in. No. Then die. Silence. Then her breath caught. Her body shook. And she opened. The shard of him, embedded in her marrow from the blood vow in the cave, pulsed. It expanded, twined into her consciousness like roots reaching for broken ground. He wasn't speaking. He was feeling. And so was she. Pain. Shame. Hunger. Rage. They bled into each other until she couldn't tell which was hers. She fell forward, hands to the bones, and screamed. Not in agony. In refusal. Fine, she spat. You all want me to be the mad daughter? The beast in the shadow? The traitor who tore her bloodline apart. She stood, bones crunching beneath her, face streaked in blood, eyes glowing. Then I'll be the monster you never learn how to cage. The bone howls surged again, but this time she didn't flinch. She opened her mouth and howled back. The sound tore through the ossuary like a blade across a war drum, vibrating the stone, shaking the pillars, shattering small bone stacks with the force of it. The howl was not pure. It was layered. With grief. With fury. With truth. And the dead heard it. One skull cracked open with a faint hiss. Then another. And another. Until the far wall, coated in dust and ash, split down the center, revealing a hidden chamber no one had spoken of in a generation. Inside, nestled in a silver-lined altar, lay a wolf skull, bleached white, still crowned with the remains of alpha markings. Her mother's. She staggered toward it, hands shaking. The moment her fingers touched the bone, it sang. A tone like a bell struck beneath water. Not a scream. Not a whisper. A word. Skathe will burn. Then another. And from bone, one voice shall rise. A final whisper. The chain was never on your throat, daughter. It was in your belief it belonged there. The howl in her head vanished. She dropped to her knees, heart pounding, breath raw. And then, inside her, Sorenik. His echo was faint, but full. You heard it? Yes. Then we don't wait. No. She stood, her body trembling, her soul intact. I'm not broken, she said. Not anymore. Chapter 21. The Bone That Remembers. Moon's Ard Plaza had not welcomed her return. Its stones were the same pale white she remembered from childhood, slabs of bleached granite veined with black woolbone dust, arranged in an ancient spiral meant to echo the bloodline's eternal order. But today, the spiral was broken, cracked where her presence touched it. She stepped into the plaza in silence, bare feet leaving red prints with every stride. Not from wounds. From her oath, a smear of bone oil and iron ink drawn down her soles in the ossuary pit before they'd let her leave. Mark her as the one who rose from bone. She walked between lines of her people. Some gasped. Others muttered slurs. None stepped forward. She didn't care. Not anymore. At the plaza's center, the elders sat in crescent formation. Lioness stood behind them, blank-eyed. Darius sat at the heart of their arc, as if he'd always belonged there. His silver robes glistened beneath the high sun, a mirror pendant nestled against his throat. Behind him, her father Morik sat motionless. Watching. Always watching. The silence tightened. Then, Eryndis lifted her voice. You've crowned a ghost. Murmurs rippled. She didn't stop. Darius Kilthorn is not born of elder line, she said, her voice ringing against the stones. He forged his blood through mirror bargain. He offered bone names to the Silver Realm in exchange for a bloodline that was never his. Darius's smile did not falter. Eryndis stepped forward and dropped a shard of fractured wool bone onto the center dais. It pulsed once, read, then sang. Not in words. In memory. A voice emerged, cold and wet and ancient. Let my blood mirror theirs. Let my oath eat the name they gave me. Gasp. One of the elders stood. That's? But then Darius raised his hand, and the mirror at his chest flared. Silver light rippled across the plaza. The shard flickered, then cracked. The memory wavered, morphing, twisting. The voice now rasped. I, Eryndis, gave my oath to silence, burned the sisters, took exile's blood. She froze. No. But the crowd had already begun to shift. She's twisting the bones. She forged it. She fell to mirror sickness in the pit. She should have stayed there. Her hands shook. She looked at Morik. He didn't rise. Didn't speak. His gaze passed through her, like she wasn't even standing there. Look at me, she whispered. He didn't. And that, more than any spell, broke her. Darius rose slowly. As you can see, he said, voice silky, even her memories betray her. It is not her truth we require, but the one that keeps the tribe whole. Lioness took a step forward. Her voice too calm. Sister, we wanted you to heal. But you came back to burn. I came back, Eryndis said, voice splintering, to remember. And now, Darius said, we ask you to forget. Guards stepped closer. One reached for her wrist. And still, no one moved to stop it. She turned in a slow circle. Faces she once trained with. Voices she once sang beside. Now watched her like she was the sickness. She dropped to her knees. Not in surrender. In revelation. Then let me be what you fear, she whispered. If I'm not Alpha. She looked up. Her eyes glowed faintly with marrow flare. Then I'll be Calamity. Far from the plaza, buried beneath the holdfast cliffs, chained inside a crimson-bound prison of ash steel and mirror glass. Sorenik felt her voice. It split through his mind like a blade dragged across his own memory. He saw her kneel. He felt her heartbeat fracture. And something snapped. The blood Veythar in his chest pulsed. The fracture lines along his back burned to life. His vision went white, then red. He reached up, gripped the chain around his throat, and pulled. The steel cracked. He roared. The guards outside screamed. And then he was gone. Back at the plaza, the ground trembled. People staggered. Elders shouted. The sky above dimmed unnaturally. And from the far edge of the stone path, through the ceremonial arches, he came. Sorenik Veythar. Unshackled. Unbound. His eyes were no longer blue. They were black. Holy. Burning with blood flame. Veins across his body pulsed crimson. And behind him, the air bent with heat. His presence seared the air. The crowd backed away in instinctive terror. He didn't look at them. Only at her. Where she knelt. Where her breath caught. Where her lips moved silently. You came. And his voice, low, deep, breaking. I told you. You wouldn't fall alone. Chapter 22, The Bound and the Burning. The doors to the Ancestors' Gate shut behind her with the finality of a tomb. Eryndis didn't flinch. She threw the locking bar into place, 3 iron latches carved from the rib bone of the first Skathe Alpha. No one but the bloodbound could open them now. The chamber was small, circular, lit only by a faint glow from the bone runes etched into the walls. This was not a room meant for the living. It was a holding cell carved deep into the stone beneath the old ceremonial tower, used once a century to contain those on the brink of becoming something else. Something no longer bound by flesh. And that was what he was becoming. Sorenik Veythar stood in the center of the room, panting, shirt torn open across the chest where his fracture veins burned molten red. The sigils that once traced his spine had become wild, erratic, alive, writhing like open scars across his body. His jaw clenched. His eyes, black and bottomless, saw her but didn't see her. She had moments. Maybe less. You shouldn't be here, he growled. I'm not leaving. Eryndis. He staggered. Clawed fingers gripped his own arms, trying to hold himself in. She moved slowly. Stepped toward him across the bone-tiled floor. He backed away. Get out, he snarled. You don't understand what I'll do to you. Yes, I do. His breathing grew harsher. You're not built to contain this, he said. My blood, my soul, is unraveling. You'll be torn apart before I touch you. Then tear me. His eyes widened. I'm not here to protect myself, she said, stepping closer. I'm here to keep you alive. He dropped to his knees, hands fisting the ground. The floor cracked beneath his palms. She reached him just as he let out a howl, one that shook the bone walls and made the old sigils hiss with warning. The beast was surfacing. He thrashed once, nearly knocking her off balance. But she held, pressed her body to his from behind and wrapped her arms around his chest, legs folding beneath his so they collapsed together in a tangle of pain and containment. He bucked. She did not let go. Breathe, she whispered. I've got you. I'll hurt you. Then hurt me, but stay here. He growled. Bit down on his own shoulder. She gripped his face, forced him to look at her. You remember the bone voice, she whispered. The one that screamed I was weak? That said I would burn us both. His chest heaved. I'm still here, she said. And so are you. She brought her hand to his neck, pressed her thumb against the burn sigil she'd carved into him during the fight at Bloodfang. It flared. His whole body seized. And then he collapsed, sobbing. It wasn't weakness. It was the cost of holding on. Hours passed. She didn't sleep. She held him as the rage passed in waves, as his breathing slowed, as the temperature in the chamber dropped from blood boil to silence. Only then did she shift. Laid him across her lap, brushing fingers through the sweat-soaked strands of his hair. He was no longer shaking. But he wasn't whole either. He never would be. Neither would she. And maybe that was the point. "You saved me 7 times," she whispered, voice ragged, lips pressed to the crown of his head. "When I wanted to die. When I wanted to disappear. When I believed no one could want me alive." Her eyes closed. "This is me returning the debt." He didn't answer. He was unconscious, body limp against hers, heartbeat a fragile thing pressed to her thigh. But she didn't move. Didn't speak again. Only held him. Until the light began to seep in beneath the door. A knock. Then a push. The bone latches, set to respond only to blood airs, shifted. Eryndis didn't move. She already knew who it would be. The door creaked open. And Lioness stood there. Pale. Composed. Cloaked in silver. Her eyes took in the scene, her sister on the floor, hair matted with blood and sweat, arms around a half-mad exile. She didn't blink. "You broke the sacred seal," she said softly. "You've turned your back on every law we were raised to uphold." Eryndis met her gaze. Not rising. Not flinching. "I turned my back on a tribe that let monsters thrive and called it peace." Lioness stepped forward. Her eyes held no malice. No emotion at all. "You've betrayed the blood." Eryndis shifted Sorenik's head gently to the side. Then stood. Blood still streaked her jaw. Her arms. Her thighs. And yet, she stood taller than ever. "I'm done trying to be a daughter they can forgive," she said. "Now I'll be a truth they can't ignore." Lioness didn't move. Didn't speak. Only stepped aside, leaving the door open. A warning. Or an invitation. It didn't matter. Eryndis stepped past her, the fire of 1,000 unshed howls burning in her chest. Behind her, Sorenik stirred. And above, the ancestral bells began to ring. Chapter 23, The Sister with No Shadow. The wind at the top of Muwatch Tower sliced through bone and memory alike. Eryndis stood beneath the Arch of Silverstone, the highest point of the Skathe dominion. From here, the full span of ancestral lands unfurled beneath her, ridge to ravine, crypt to court, every path she'd once memorized in girlhood now crusted in frost and distance. The last time she'd stood here, she was a child gripping her mother's cloak. Now the cloak was ashes, and the tower had no warmth left to offer. Below, the crowd gathered like winter storm clouds. The whisper of judgment traveled faster than the bells. And across from her, framed in dawnlight, stood Lioness. No longer her sister. Only her shadow's erasure. She was dressed in the ceremonial white of Alpha Ascension, not the woven iron of combat, but the silken folds of accepted legacy. Hair tied back, eyes distant, mouth a perfect still line. Eryndis watched her with something like mourning. Something like awe. And something like fury. "I didn't come to challenge you," she said. "I came to remember you." Lioness did not move. Below them, Darius stepped onto the lower dais, hands lifted for silence. His voice rang like a sermon. "By unanimous elder decree, Lioness Skathe shall assume the title of Alpha in heir. Her sister, Eryndis Skathe, shall be stripped of the blood right in 3 days' time. The ceremony of severance will be held at dusk." Gasps. Murmurs. Lioness lifted her gaze, voice like polished steel. "My sister suffers from bone-borne fracture. She is not fit to lead." Eryndis stepped forward. "Speak to me alone. Just once. No mirror. No witness." For a moment, something flickered. A pulse. A tremor. Then Lioness turned. And walked into the tower's central sanctum. Eryndis followed. Inside, silence reigned. The chamber was small, circular, with a single brazier casting shadows on the walls carved with family lines. The scent of wool-bone ink still clung to the stones. Eryndis shut the door behind her. Then faced her. "I know what he's done to you," she said softly. "The mirror. The ceremony. The dreams. I know they rewrote you." Lioness didn't blink. "You told me once that you'd braid my hair even if I grew claws. That you'd follow me into the pit if they dragged me there." A beat of silence. Do you remember that? Lyanna tilted her head. I remember a sister who turned her back on our family. I remember her breaking our mother's oath. I remember her hands, red with the one who gave her life. Eryndis staggered. No, that's not what happened. I saw it in the mirror. That wasn't truth. That was Dariath's poison. My truth is clear, Lyanna said, stepping forward. You are the reason our mother is dead. You are the reason this tribe is broken. She pulled the dagger from her belt. Eryndis stopped breathing. It was the bone dagger. Their mother's. The one used in the rite of bloodbinding. Lyanna raised it, slit her palm cleanly, and held it between them. I swear before the blood and the bone, before the dead and the living, I will end your name myself. The blood dripped onto the stone floor. Eryndis said nothing for a long moment, then stepped forward. Her voice broke on the edges. Then here, she said, gently closing her sister's fingers around the blade's hilt. If you no longer remember me, then make the cut clean. Don't leave a scar. Leave nothing. Lyanna flinched. Just barely. But it was there. A heartbeat. A hesitation. Eryndis turned away. And didn't look back. When she stepped out onto the tower ledge again, the wind had shifted. Dariath stood at the edge now, silver cloak billowing. 3 days from now, he declared, we purify the bloodline. Cheers rang out below. Bells began to toll. One for silence. One for loss. One for the future. Eryndis stood unmoving, eyes fixed on the horizon. And somewhere deep in her marrow, something ancient stirred. A bone not yet broken. A howl not yet freed. Chapter 24, The Bride of No Name. The ash petals fell like snowfall, soft and silent, coating the garden with a shroud of mourning masquerading as beauty. Eryndis stood barefoot in the center of Ashreath Garden, surrounded by veiled figures who never lifted their gazes above her shoulders. Their hands moved with precision, tying ceremonial knots in her veil, painting her fingernails with mourning ash, tracing ancestral sigils across her arms. None of them spoke to her. She was not a person today. She was a promise. A transaction. A thing to be tied and sent away before her name could rot further in the mouths of the tribe. Not one of them had told her who she was being given to. Just that the bride price had already been written in blood, and the only way to secure peace, true peace, was to send the mad daughter of Skathe far from the lands she'd shamed. You should be honored, someone had whispered. To be wed to the old wolf of Farreach. Few women live long enough to bear his mark. She hadn't asked who that was. It didn't matter. This wasn't a marriage. It was exile with lace. She was kept in the burial house the night before the rites. The same place where her mother's bones had been burned, where alpha sigils were once inked in marrow and silence. The walls still reeked of sage and old iron, the floors covered in woven furs to absorb the tears of those who wept too late. She didn't cry. She sat alone in the center of the chamber, veil discarded, hands limp in her lap. Until the pain struck. Sharp. Sudden. Inside her skull. She gasped. Clutched her chest. The fracture sigil. It pulsed, not hers. His. A tether in her marrow twisted. The air around her distorted. And then, he was there. Not in body. In dream. Sorenik stood before her, barefoot and bleeding. Cracks spidered across his chest, light leaking through like molten red glass. His face was drawn tight with rage. "What are you doing?" he snarled, voice thick with agony. "You shouldn't be here. You shouldn't be marrying a corpse with a blood title. I didn't choose it. You didn't fight it." Eryndis stood, fists clenched. "They've locked you in the sealing chamber. If I resist, they'll kill you. Don't you understand? Let them. No. Let me die. Let me burn, but don't let them put another man's name in your throat." Her hands trembled. "You think I care about a name?" she hissed. "About pride. I think you'd rather vanish than watch me fade." Silence. Then, "You're right." She stepped toward him. Her dream form shimmered, blood-specked wedding paint streaking down her cheek. I'm not afraid of being forgotten, she whispered. I'm afraid of you vanishing before I can choose you. The tether burned brighter. Sorenik stepped closer. The dream pulsed with strain. I swore I'd die before they took you. I don't want you to die, she said, voice cracking. I want you here. His body shook. The cracks deepened. I can't hold the link much longer. She cupped his face. I'll bring you back. His eyes met hers. Eryndis. She kissed him. Not for comfort. Not for goodbye. For remembrance. Then he vanished. She woke with blood on her lips. No one had entered the room. No one had seen. But something in the walls had changed. Something old. She rose. Moved to the northmost wall, the only one without carvings. There, hidden beneath a veil of ash ink, lay a seam. She pressed her palm to it. Whispered a name she'd buried long ago. And the wall opened. Beyond it, a single altar. A stone dagger. And a silver-bound bone shard, the bone mark relic, forged only once per generation, to transfer ancestral power outside official succession. It had been buried with her mother. She reached for it. It hummed beneath her skin. The bone flared, then seared. Lines carved down her palm like lightning striking flesh. She gasped but did not let go. The sigil embedded itself into her flesh. Alpha of Blood returned. A title long lost to legend. They knocked on her door at dusk. She did not answer. She stood before the mirror instead, robed in red and gray silk, face marked with ash. No veil. Only her mother's blade at her side. When they came for her, she walked silently. Down the path of old bone. Toward the altar. Toward the unknown husband. Toward the ceremony that would erase her. She stepped into the garden. The cold wind blew. The ash rained down. And the moment her foot crossed the final threshold, the bone mark on her palm ignited. Silently. Invisibly. Only she could feel it. Only she would carry it. The Alpha was not dead. She had simply not yet begun. Chapter 25. The Bond They Cannot Break. The severed temple did not have doors, only teeth. Jagged stone arches framed the temple's entrance, each fawn-like curve carved from the jawbones of Alpha ancestors long buried. No one entered it willingly. To do so was to sever one's name, one's path, even one's soul, unless they had come to fuse it with another. Eryndis came alone, under cover of night, wearing the ashes of her aborted marriage and the blood mark of a forgotten rite. She had torn the ceremonial veil in half, thrown the remains into the river of bone, and whispered her refusal into the wind. The elders would be searching for her by dawn. The blood rite was meant to be sacred. What she was about to do would be called sacrilege. But she didn't hesitate. Because he was dying. The interior of the severed temple pulsed with latent marrow energy. Cracked spires of fossilized bone reached skyward in ruined arches, but none connected. This place had no ceiling. Only the open throat of the sky. Stars flickered overhead like watching eyes, indifferent and bright. At the temple's center, chained beneath a collapsed column, knelt Sorenik. He was no longer speaking. His body shook, fracture lines spidering in every direction, glowing, expanding, cracking his ribs, his arms, even his face. He hadn't heard her arrive. Not until she touched him. He recoiled violently, growled low. Feral. She did not flinch. Sorenik. Nothing. She pressed her hand flat against his chest, directly above the bone core. You wanted to die for me. His head twitched toward her. Now I need you to live for me. Stillness. I'm not here to save you, she said softly. I'm here to give you what you gave me. A pause. A flicker of breath. His voice, ragged and broken, scraped through. Don't bind yourself to this. I already did, she said. This is just the last cut. She unsheathed her dagger. He watched with eyes gone dark. Silent. Shaking. And she pressed the blade to her palm. Then to her tongue. Bone and blood. She whispered her marrow right in the old tongue, one she wasn't even supposed to know, one hidden in the final howl of her mother's death echo. Sorenik's eyes widened. He began to shake. She leaned forward, pressed her lips to the top of his spine, and bit. Blood flooded her mouth. Then she spoke, through the wound, through the crack in his core, bone voice vibrating through both their skeletons. His body arched. She didn't stop. She drove the word deeper. A single, irreversible sigil that would burn their marrow into each other. Not a symbol of obedience. Not dominance. Only synchrony. She let go. He gasped, clawed at the ground. Then he surged upward and bit her. The final mark. The pulse burst. Light flashed. Everything dropped away. She couldn't see. Couldn't breathe. Then images. Not hers. His. A small boy standing in an ash-covered hall. A woman screaming as her skin split open from within. Silver marks etched into her spine. A mirror held up by elders. Gaslighting. Disbelief. He screamed, "She's not mad, she's cursed." But no one listened. They dragged her body away, and Sorenik was left kneeling in the bones. Alone. When Eryndis woke, they were on the temple floor. Bodies tangled. Breathing shallow. Blood between them. Not from battle. From bonding. Neither spoke. Her palm rested over his heart. His fingers curled in her hair. He didn't kiss her. She didn't lean into him. They just breathed. Silence stretched. Finally, her voice. "You gave me your pain." His eyes flicked open. Red ringed. She pressed her forehead to his. "Now I can't die." A tear slid down his cheek. "And neither can you." At dawn, the council dome rang with the sound of iron bells. Darius stood before the assembled elders, robed pristine. He raised a scroll bound in bone wire. "Eryndis Skathe has violated the severance pact," he said calmly. "She has performed a marrow bonding with a known exile and fracture vessel." Gasps. He let the silence fall. Then spoke the verdict. "She is no longer wolf blood. No longer Skathe. She is outside our law. Outside our name." He looked to the ceremonial blade waiting at his side. "She is to be executed at sundown." Chapter 26. The Last Door She Shuts. The ancestor vault had always smelled of cold stone and sanctified dust. But now it smelled of something else. Decay. Eryndis stepped into the corridor with bare feet, silence thick around her like a burial shroud. Behind her, the heavy ironwood door creaked shut with finality. It was not sealed, yet she knew this was a room entered only once and not always left again. She passed under the arch of carved bone spines, where the names of the first 9 alphas whispered from rune-etched ribs. Her breath fogged before her. Not from cold. From the pressure of truth. At the end of the long vault hall, her father knelt before the ancestral pyre. Alone. A low fire burned in the stone brazier behind him, its light too weak to warm the space. He didn't look up as she approached. He was murmuring, soft, disjointed phrases that didn't form words at first. Then he stilled. "You've come to watch me die too?" he asked without turning. "No," Eryndis said quietly. "I've come to ask you to speak for me." He laughed. Or maybe it was a sob. "You think the tribe will listen to me now?" His shoulders shook. "You think I hold weight in the court that gutted me? You're still the elder whose word forged my mother's bond." He flinched. She stepped closer. "I need you, father. Just this once. Speak the truth before they silence me forever." At last, he turned. And Eryndis froze. His eyes, once steel blue, were now filmy with shimmer. Not mist. Not age. Mirror ripple. The mark of a man whose soul had been threaded with illusion. He didn't see her. Not truly. "No," he whispered. No, you're not her. You're not my child." She took a step back. "Father. You're her shape, but not her voice." He lurched to his feet, then lunged. His hands closed around her throat before she could breathe. His strength was not what it once was, but madness gave it edge. "You're the silver nightmare," he snarled. "You tricked her face, stole her bones, made me sign away her blood. Eryndis clawed at his arms, coughing, choking. "Stop, father, it's me." He didn't hear. Didn't stop. Her knees hit the floor. Her vision blurred. And then, the vault doors exploded. A shape barreled in, rage incarnate. Sorenik. He didn't hesitate. One strike to her father's shoulder. The old man crumpled backward. Eryndis gasped, clutching her throat, the bruises already blooming. Sorenik caught her, held her steady. But Morik didn't rise. He sat slumped against the wall, breathing ragged, eyes wide with flickering confusion. Sorenik stepped between them, but Eryndis reached forward. "Wait," she rasped. Morik's lips trembled. "I saw her, in the mirror," he whispered. But she wasn't screaming. He reached for something in the air that wasn't there. She was singing. Singing in the fire. His hand fell. She said, "You're still mine, even if I failed you." A tear slid down his face. Then, slowly, he lifted the ceremonial dagger from his belt. No, Eryndis moved, too slow. With a single motion, he dragged it across his own throat. Blood hit the vault floor in a sharp, clean arc. He slid down the wall, gurgling. Eryndis dropped beside him, hands useless against the rush. His lips moved. She leaned in. "She is the Alpha," he whispered. "She always was." Then he was still. And the vault fell silent once more. She did not cry. Not at first. Only when she pressed her forehead to the pool of blood gathering around his feet did the tears fall, hot, bitter, quiet. Sorenik knelt behind her. Didn't speak. Just laid a hand on her back. She didn't shrug it off. When the sobs came, they were low. Broken. Soundless. "I hated him," she whispered. "For so long. I know. I hated how he never looked at me when it mattered. I know." She looked up, eyes rimmed with red. "I don't forgive him." "You don't have to. But I still," her voice broke again. "I still wanted him to see me." Sorenik didn't say anything. He just pulled her into his arms. Held her like she was shattering and molten all at once. She let him. Only after her breathing calmed did he speak again, his voice low in her ear. "One day, you'll redeem every part of yourself that loves someone who couldn't love you back. Even if you have to do it with fury." She didn't answer. But she didn't let go either. When they rose, the blood had already cooled. At the edge of the vault, the bones hummed faintly. And then a voice. Not his. Not hers. Not even memory. But bone. The next Alpha must drink the fracture. Must walk upon red bone unflinching. Sorenik looked at her. She stared into the darkness. And nodded once. Chapter 27. The Red Gate opens. The red bone threshold pulsed in the half-light, a silent heartbeat buried deep within the earth. Eryndis stood before it, breath caught somewhere between agony and prophecy. The passage to this place had long been sealed in myth, etched out of the oral lineages, buried beneath fractured vaults. It was said only one carrying the true bone howl could find it again. But the bones remembered her. And now, they whispered back. The Red Gate was not metal or stone. It was made entirely of fused alpha marrow, rib cages woven into an archway, vertebrae spiraled into spirals that hummed with ancestral resonance. Beneath it lay the path to the alpha's severance mark, the lost sigil of bloodline dominion. Her hand hovered above the central seal. And a voice called out, "Eryndis Skathe." She turned. Lioness stood at the edge of the threshold. No longer the sister who had braided her hair, who had slept beside her during winter storms, who had whispered shared dreams under the funeral veils of their mother. That Lioness was dead. This Lioness wore mirrored bone along her spine, silver threads in her hair like puppet strings. Her eyes were hollow. Perfect. "Step away," she said coldly. "The gate does not belong to you." "I was born of it," Eryndis replied. "You were broken from it. I was chosen by it. You betrayed everything it stood for." "No," Eryndis said, stepping forward. "I'm the only one who still remembers what it meant." Lioness didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. Her hands lifted, and a shimmer passed between her fingers, silver-tinted bone powder. Mirror marrow. The dust struck the ground. The space between them bent. And suddenly, the world shattered. Eryndis gasped. The temple was gone. She stood in the bone courtyard again, 12 years ago. She was 13. Her mother stood before her, arms open, silver hair falling over her face. But something was wrong. The scent. It was blood. Eryndis looked down. The dagger. In her own hand. Buried in her mother's chest. No, she choked. No, I didn't. Her mother smiled. You always wanted to be stronger than me, didn't you? Eryndis backed away. But the scene played again. And again. The sound of the blade sliding in. The eyes closing. Her own voice screaming. She clutched her head. The pain throbbed. Her grip on reality loosened. And from the shadows, Lyanna stepped into the illusion. She died because of you, she said calmly. You didn't listen. You never did. Eryndis screamed. Then, a sound. Deep. Familiar. Ferocious. Sorenik. Not his voice. His echo. From the marrow-bound mark burned into her spine. You're not her shadow, he growled in her mind. You were never her reflection. You were the howl that survived the fire. And something snapped. Eryndis roared. The illusion splintered like glass, shards of memory dissolving into dust. The temple returned. Lyanna stumbled back, eyes wide, momentarily stripped of illusion. Eryndis stood tall, sweat clinging to her neck, her breath heaving like the wind before a storm. She stepped forward, closed the distance, looked her sister in the eye and whispered, You're not her shadow. I am. I carry the burn, the guilt, the scream. You carry nothing. She raised her hand. The red gate pulsed, then opened. A rush of wind howled through the chamber. Light, not golden, not silver, but fractured red bled into the space, cascading over the bones like falling embers. Eryndis stepped through. The marrow beneath her feet lit with each step. The gate sealed behind her. Lyanna didn't follow. At the center of the chamber, a single stone rose from the floor, an altar carved from the fused femurs of 1,000 wolves. She reached out, placed both hands on it. Pain lanced through her back. She screamed. Not from agony. From recognition. The sigil seared into her spine. The remnant alpha mark. Not the crown of command. The seal of destruction. Above her, the sky of the chamber cracked open. Red aurora surged. 1,000 voices whispered from the marrow. May you end what we could not. May you become what we feared. May you burn it all. And beneath her skin, the howl began to rise. Chapter 28, The Last Howl of the Broken Moon. The moon was not whole. It hung above Munrend altar like a wounded eye, its lower crescent fractured into a gaping maw that bled silver across the sky. Beneath it, Eryndis stood alone. Her bare feet touched the marrow-veined stone of the altar, bloodless now, but carved with the history of her bloodline. Behind her, the silence of 1,000 watching wolves pressed against the mountain air, tribespeople, elders, even her enemies. All waiting. All watching. The ancestral markings pulsed along her arms. The bone mark relic burned beneath her skin like a second heartbeat. Her breath caught in her throat, not fear, not doubt, the readiness before ruin. She stepped into the circle. The rite began. But before the first echo of bone resonance could rise, Dariath moved. One gesture. A shimmer. The silver mirror flared in his palm. And the world broke. It was instant. One blink and everything was wrong. Eryndis stood again at her mother's deathbed, dagger in hand, blood slicked down her palm. The old woman's chest rose and fell once, then stilled. Screams. Cries of betrayal. You did this, Lyanna shrieked. She's the curve-born, shouted an elder. She brought the moon's fracture. No, Eryndis choked. This isn't real. But no one heard her. They turned as one. Their faces melted into masks of grief and rage. The crowd morphed into a lynch mob, led not by reason, but by belief, twisted, curated belief, the kind born of mirror-light lies and years of whispered hate. She stumbled back. The altar blurred, blood rising to her ankles. "Drown her," they chanted. "Cleanse the bone." She fell to her knees, vision dimming. But somewhere a sound. Eryndis. A growl. "You're not done yet." A pulse ignited in her spine. The fracture sigil she shared with Sorenik burned. And in that fire, the illusion screamed. It shattered like breaking glass. They were in the dream's heart now. The inner fold, where illusion and memory became flesh. And at the center stood Darioth, or what was left of him. He towered, hunched and grotesque, his body fused with the silver mirror and half-formed bone wolves. 6 arms extended from his sides, 2 clawed, 2 cracked, 2 holding chains that connected to the twitching bodies of the tribespeople. Their eyes were white, minds hollowed. "You think you can lead what you cannot even save?" Darioth thundered. His voice echoed with 10,000 distorted howls. "I don't want to lead," Eryndis said softly. "I want to end you." She lifted her hands. The alpha bone mark flared. Bone-laced wings spread from her back, not feathers, but jagged ribs and burning sigils. Sorenik appeared at her side, wild and pulsing with fracture light. His body cracked in failing, but his eyes locked on hers. "Now," she whispered. They charged. It was not a fight. It was a war of will. Eryndis used bone voice, sending pure ancestral resonance into the tethered minds of the tribe. "Remember who you are." A few blinked. An elder staggered, retching. The mirror chains began to fray. Darioth howled. His form split, 1 head, then 2. The second wore her mother's face. "You stabbed me," it hissed. "You chose yourself over me." "No," Eryndis gasped, nearly collapsing. From behind her, Lyanna emerged. Face blank. Dagger drawn. Eyes full of silver. She lunged. Eryndis tried to raise her hand, but the image of her mother froze her. And then Sorenik moved. He stepped between them. No hesitation. The blade drove into his side. The sound he made wasn't pain. It was peace. His hands gripped Lyanna's wrist and threw her back into the dream fog. She vanished. Eryndis caught him as he fell. "No," she whispered. "No, not now, not." He touched her cheek and smiled. His chest cracked. Light poured out. "This is the only way," he whispered in her mind. "No. I gave you my pain. Now take what's left of my blood." He pressed his forehead to hers, and the fracture mark on his chest burst, its essence flooding into her body. It was agony. It was completion. Bone and blood. Spirit and sound. The alpha fusion triggered. Her scream split the sky. When she stood again, the ground trembled. Her wings were real now. Bone fire flared behind her. The last of her tears burned away. She walked to Darioth. He roared, struck at her. She caught his arm and ripped the mirror from his chest. He convulsed, screamed, shrieked, but she didn't kill him. Instead, she sang a bone song, low, resonant, one of memory. She pressed the mirror to his temple and burned his truth into the marrow of every single tribe member. Not death. Shame. Eternal. Darioth fell. Not screaming. Just silent. She turned. Carried Sorenik's body from the collapsing dream. The illusion peeled away. The altar returned. The people knelt. She ignored them. The moon bled above her, fractured and final. She laid his body at the altar. Held him. He stirred once. "You never hated me," she whispered. His lips curved. "I didn't say that," he rasped. "Then why?" "Because," he coughed. "You made me your echo, before I could become your end." He exhaled. Light rose from his chest. His fracture mark dissolved. And in its place, a single feather of bone light drifted into her palm. He was gone. She stood, turned to the tribe. Her eyes were ash and flame. My hall doesn't belong to you, she said. You wanted an alpha. She spread her arms. Now bow to the one with bowfire in her name. They did. Every single one. But she didn't smile. She only looked at the moon. And whispered, "Burn with me." Chapter 29, Ashes of What We Were. The Skathe throne hall had never been quiet before. Once, it had pulsed with the heavy rhythm of ritual drums, the crackle of bowfire, the roars of alpha inheritance rites echoing across its ribs of stone. Once, it had smelled of marrow ink and old iron and fear. Now, it smelled only of ash. The banners of silver and frost that once lined the walls had been torn down. In their place hung nothing. No symbols. No sacred threads. Just bare stone, cracked and scorched. Eryndis sat atop the bone dais, not on the alpha throne, but before it. Her robe was torn at the hem, the fabric scorched in places where Sorenik's fractured blood had once touched her. Her back bore the sigils of the battle they all remembered, but none could name aloud. No silver armor marked her shoulders. No crown adorned her brow. They had asked her if she wanted the ceremonial plate. She had laughed. The elders stood to her left, stripped of their former colors, now clothed in the dust-stained grays of those who had once failed but were permitted to try again. Their heads were bowed, their hands open. No chains, no bone knives, no illusions. Before them, hundreds of tribespeople. Some still bore the old marks. Others, the tremor of returned thought. They watched her like they watched the rise of a storm too long held back. Eryndis lifted her voice. Today we burned 3 laws. No echo followed. Only silence. The law of mirror verdict, gone. No soul shall ever again be judged by illusion. A few heads dipped. One woman sobbed. The law of forced pairing shattered. No alpha shall ever bind what doesn't breathe for them freely. Soft murmurs. A rustle of exhaled breath. And the law of bone severance, she finished, voice thick with quiet fire buried. No kin shall be stripped of memory, no matter how much it hurts. Stillness. Then one voice. Alpha, someone whispered. Then more. Alpha. Alpha. Eryndis Skathe. The chant rose. But she didn't move. Didn't blink. Didn't smile. Instead, she placed a single hand on the cracked edge of the throne. And said, "From this moment forward, the alpha is not the one chosen by blood." She looked over the sea of faces, some wide with awe, others weeping, many still haunted. She saw herself in every one. "The alpha," she said softly, "is the one whose voice we remember." That night they celebrated. Or tried to. Bonfires were lit. Songs were sung. Not the old ones, but hesitant new ballads written in the days after the moon split. There was dancing. Laughter. But none reached the mountain's peak. None reached her. Eryndis walked alone up the spiral spine of Moon's car watch. The stars were silver wounds above her, and the fractured moon was now quiet, no longer bleeding. Below her, the valley shimmered with 100 small lights, homes being rebuilt, fires kept close. She didn't wear shoes. Didn't bring a cloak. Her hands were raw from ceremony. Her lips still dry from speaking law into being. But she held one thing tightly in her fist. A pouch of powdered bone. At the summit of the watch, an altar waited. Empty. Unused for decades. She crouched there, laying the dust across the altar's surface in a spiral shape. Then she whispered, "Come." And the echo came. He wasn't real. Not entirely. Sorenik stood across from her, just as she remembered him that final night, spine cracked, hair soaked in ash and sweat, gaze unreadable. He didn't speak. He never had. These were not his words. Just remnants. But when he moved, when his lips twitched in that cruel, almost smile, when his brow furrowed at her silence, it was enough. She didn't cry at first. She just watched him. Watched as the fragments of his soul walked through her dreams like he always had, untouchable and too close. He said, "You'll never stop burning things, will you?" She whispered back, "Only when there's nothing left." He said, "You're not meant to be followed." She smiled, tears finally tracing the edge of her cheek. "I know." He tilted his head. "You still don't hate me, do you?" She stepped closer, shook her head, and said, "You always said I was an echo." His face flickered, as if about to vanish. But she caught him. Not with her hands, with her words. She said, "Did you ever realize you were the cleanest sound in my bones?" He stilled. Then, he smiled. And faded. She didn't move for a long time after. Just sat in the moonlight, watching her breath rise and fall. Watching the wind scatter the powdered bone. Below, the tribe dreamed. And in the highest tower of Moonskar, Eryndis opened her palm one final time. The bone shard, his bone, the one that refused to decay, glimmered softly in her hand. Then brightened. Just once. Like the whisper of a laugh caught in a mountain wind. Chapter 30, The Alpha They Couldn't Break. The hall was not made of bone. Not anymore. Wolf Hall Reclaim stood in a crescent of young ironwood and moonstone, its beams carved by hands that had never known chains, its arches painted in ochre streaks, not blood. The throne was gone. In its place, a long, wide table. And around that table sat the new voices of Skathe. Elders by name only, most barely older than 30 winters. Survivors of the Mirror Wars, bearers of fracture scars and clear eyes. They listened now. And they learned. But she still did not sit among them. Eryndis stood at the edge of the chamber, arms folded, watching the youngest circle train. They were barely 10, some younger, still with the soft ears of half-shifted cubs and knobby limbs that moved too fast for their thoughts. But when she spoke, they stilled. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't have to. "Listen with more than your ears," she said. "Bone is memory. It does not lie. But it doesn't shout either." A boy in the back raised his hand. "What if the bone's too quiet?" Eryndis knelt in front of him. "Then sit with it until it trusts you." The children nodded. Some closed their eyes. One placed her cheek against a carved tibia and whispered something. Eryndis stood again. The ache in her spine was worse these days. The bone mark had faded, but the fire it left behind had not. One of the young counselors approached her. "Alpha." She turned. "I told you not to call me that." The girl flushed. "Eryndis. There's a proposal." "Of course there is." The girl cleared her throat. "The council wants to commission a sculpture. You, in full hell stance, on the Munrend Peak, facing the sea." Eryndis arched a brow. "So I can stare into the wind for eternity? It's meant to honor." "Honor is a cage with flowers on it." The counselor faltered. "Then, a title? Something permanent?" "The Broken Sovereign. Or Mother of Bowfire." Eryndis stared at her. "Do you want to remember what I did?" she asked, voice low. "Or do you want to silence it with marble?" The girl couldn't answer. Eryndis turned her gaze to the sea. "You want to thank me? That's fine. But don't turn me into something you can forget by worshipping." She walked out without waiting for a reply. The wind at the sundered shore was sharp, laced with salt and the old hush of tides that remembered too much. Eryndis stood at the cliff's edge. In her hand was the final piece of him. Sorenik's bone shard, the last fragment of the fracture mark he'd left behind. It had dulled over the moons. No longer glowing, no longer warm. But it pulsed still, now and then, like a ghost pressing against her palm. She closed her fingers around it, whispered something that wasn't a name, and threw it into the sea. The wind caught it, carried it far, far out, beyond where the cliffs curved and the rocks gave way to the deep. Below, the waves rose and fell like lungs. The shard sank. She watched until the ripples were swallowed by moonlight. She sat on the shore for a long time. The surf misted her hair. The cold wrapped her, but did not bite. Her hand rested on her knee, empty now. "I'm not here for anyone anymore," she said softly, eyes still closed. "Not for the ones who hated me. Not for the ones who needed me." A pause. "I'm not here to avenge you either." Silence. Then, I'm just here to let the hell be free. When she stood, the clouds had parted. Above her, the shattered moon was no longer split. Not whole, but no longer bleeding. A soft crescent of light glimmered over the water. She turned away from it, walked back into the mist, and did not look back. The final voice. Wolves don't belong in cages. And they don't belong on pedestals. Wolves belong beneath the bone, howling for no one but themselves.